Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Projection System Box. Obtain Spider-Man ability at the beginning. Chapter 21. It was an hour after returning home, and in the face of his family's inquiries, Leon was very calm, just saying that he witnessed an accident last night and was taken out for questioning. George seemed to think of something, and although he was still a little suspicious, he didn't say much. Leon knew how much he could cope with the past, so he ate on his own again, chatted with his family and watched TV after dinner, until after 10 o'clock, he couldn't wait to call the system again. System, Projection Magneto. Drip, Projection Magneto, Trumpet 175 point kill, the host still has 30 seconds of preparation time. The killing value consumed is a lot. Leon underestimated, then waited quietly, and 30 seconds later, he appeared in a city. Looking around, the endless high-rise buildings, the streets are scattered, like spider webs, and he appeared on the roof of a tall building, looking up, still can't see the edge. It is estimated that Magneto is very strong. Leon expected this. After all, Magneto in the original work is a big villain, a boss-level character. He feels that he is now very strong, but he doesn't know if he can win against Magneto, but the power of a battle must be there. Thinking so, under his thoughts, the blade appeared on his body, squatting on the outside of the roof, quietly waiting for Magneto's arrival. Time passed minute by minute. There was no wind or noise in the projection space, and the surrounding silence was terrifying, but Leon's mood was very calm, without the slightest wave. 10 minutes later, he suddenly raised his head and looked at a place, and there was a gaze in that direction that also looked towards him, a very heroic middle-aged man, to this strangely shaped helmet, wearing a combat uniform with a cape, was slowly floating from a distance. Yes, it is floating, and Magneto can easily change the magnetic field to make himself float, which is easier for him than drinking water. Who is Magneto? The veteran powerhouse in the Marvel world, the terrifying villain boss, whose own magnetic control ability, is one of the few people standing at the tip of the pyramid among the mutants. And as far as Leon knows about movies or comics, there are many famous scenes of Magneto, such as what to crack bridges with bare hands, catch missiles with bare hands, crack sports fields with bare hands, change the operation of the earth with bare hands. These things, it is scary to think about. Leon did not make a rash move, just waited quietly, and Magneto did not float towards him unhurriedly, but behind him, there was already metal slowly floating, and then looking down, the top of a building was torn apart, and the metal gathered around him, and the scene was spectacular. Leon's white eyes in the state of the blade narrowed, becoming narrower and longer, and the corners of his mouth full of sharp teeth also opened upward, and the fighting intent in his heart slowly rose, and his claws unconsciously cut the ground under his feet into crumbs. Finally, it was Magneto who made the first move, and hundreds of tons of metal spewed towards him, indeed gushing, like a wave of metal, smashing towards him. If outside, the strength of a reinforced company would be destroyed in an instant. And Leon naturally will not stupidly use his body to touch these metals. These metals are large and small, some are wide and some are as thin as a blade, and it will definitely not be too good to be hit on the body. Leon kicked sharply, the ground suddenly shattered, the whole person jumped to the side like a cannonball, and the moment he passed by the incoming metal, he felt a huge pressure. The Porcelain King is really strong. At this moment, he knew that the next battle was definitely a tough battle, and it was difficult to say whether he could win the battle, but if he was not careful, he would definitely hang up in the projection space, and against a strong man like Magneto, he couldn't be careless. Boom! After a harsh and dull loud noise, Leon looked back and saw that the building he was in just now, the overall structure had been destroyed, the top dozen floors were directly shattered, and then the massive building materials began to tilt downward until the entire building collapsed. With just one blow, the building was already destroyed as soon as it moved. Nyong, this is Magneto in its heyday, is it so terrifying? Leon suddenly felt a palpitation, and he didn't want to dodge it again, and the next moment he jumped out of place, a whistling sound fell into his ears, followed by an explosion, and the position he was in just now was smashed out of a large hole by a piece of metal. It seems that you can only fight and find an opportunity to fight him hand to hand. Otherwise you have no chance of victory. If you can obtain his ability, then your combat effectiveness will definitely have a qualitative leap. The idea is good, but the reality is very headache. Magneto's attack is completely a crushing force. If it were not for Leon's current great increase in strength, maybe he would not be able to hold on to even a face. Leon is now definitely a high-level existence among mutants in terms of combat effectiveness alone, and can crush 99% of mutants in the Marvel world, but Magneto is the remaining 1%. All he can do at this time is to dodge first and seek opportunities to counterattack. Boom! There was another loud bang. This time an elevator smashed directly over, smashing a building out of a big hole. Leon had avoided it long before this. With his current reaction ability and speed, it was very simple to avoid such an attack. Boom boom. With a bang, pieces of metal fell one by one. Building after building was destroyed beyond recognition. Magneto floated in the air like that, and the metal around him became more and more densely packed with countless pieces. Leon dodged the attacks again and again, jumping from one tall building to another, shuttling between these tall buildings, and behind him was a rain of metal pouring down, as if a cannonball was falling. Time passed slowly, and 10 minutes had passed in the blink of an eye, which meant that Leon had dodged these attacks for 10 minutes, and he had no injuries on his body, just a little embarrassed. But at this time, the spider induction suddenly came to sense. He suddenly looked up, and saw the overwhelming metal objects falling towards him. From his direction, it was like the sky was falling, and the metal objects covered every corner of his vision, making him unavoidable. The corners of his mouth split, his scarlet tongue drooped, his hands opened and instantly transformed into two sharp blades, looking upwards with full attention. Phew! When a metal window smashed towards him, he saw a cold light flash, and the window was split in two. Come on! Leon did not retreat. His legs kicked the ground, and under the cracking of the ground, his whole person had jumped high like a cannonball, rushing towards Magneto in midair, and any metal that blocked him along the way would be lightly cut off by him. But countless metals are like iron walls blocking in front of him. He cuts off one and the next one will appear, and this one will go forward and follow, and the stream is endless. Ah! Leon roared. A sharp piece of metal cut through his neck, but the wound recovered in the blink of an eye, and he stepped forward, stepping on a speeding metal plate, and the person also used this power in midair to continue to rush forward. But his front was covered by countless metal blocks. Even if he slashed fast, he was eventually buried by these metal objects, and in a moment's work, his position was only a huge metal ball suspended in the air. Magneto stretched out his hand, spread his 5 fingers, and shook the metal ball faintly. Click! The huge metal ball collapsed sharply towards the center, and its volume suddenly shrank by more than half. A moment later, blood oozed out of it and fell down like a stream. Magneto let go of his hand, and the metal ball lost its restraints and began to gradually disintegrate, while also falling downward. But at this moment, with a boom, the entire metal ball suddenly exploded, and then a pitch-black figure suddenly jumped out of it, and 2 cold and shining blades slashed towards Magneto's hood. I have to say that Magneto's combat experience is very rich. Even in the face of such a sudden attack, he did not have the slightest panic, and a metal plate blocked in front of him with a move of his hand, and this metal plate was less than 20 centimeters thick. Whoosh! The cold light flashed, and the metal plate was split from top to bottom, but it also successfully blocked Leon's momentum, making his figure fall in midair, and then he didn't focus on stopping, and he was about to fall down. But behind Leon, a bunch of wide wings suddenly opened, saying that the wings were more than 2 wing-shaped black substances, unable to swing, just a fixed shape. After all, the blade is still in the growth period, cannot fully imitate the function of the wings. But it is such a fixed shape, but it gives Leon the ability to glide. He is now less than 10 meters away from Magneto, and as soon as he steps on the metal plate that was split by him, the whole person is like a big pung flying towards Magneto. Close. Closer. The distance between the two was only 1 meter in a blink of an eye, but it was this meter, but it was like a heavenly graben, and the blade that Leon turned into with one hand suddenly stopped at a distance of only a dozen centimeters from Magneto's throat. Poof, poof, poof. Several sharp metal thorns, coming from all directions, penetrated Leon's body at an extremely fast speed, fixing him in front of Magneto. Leon's head hung low, as if dead. Magneto stretched out his hand to Leon expressionlessly, his 5 fingers tightened slightly, and the sharp metals that penetrated Leon's body began to bend one by one, entangled with each other, as if to twist his body into twists. Leon's hand drooped, seemingly without strength, but at this electric flint, Leon's hanging hand suddenly raised, the blade turned into a sharp claw, instantly expanded, and suddenly squeezed Magneto in the palm of his hand. You're fooled. Leon raised his head, his face full of anger. Leon was inserted with several slender metal thorns on his body at this time, but there was not the slightest blood flowing out, and he saw that under the squirming of the dark substance around his body, those metal thorns were pulled out little by little, and the wound was also healed in the blink of an eye. His hand held Magneto tightly, and his body approached him as his arm shortened, and finally came to him, his scarlet tongue pulled, and he said, "Thanks to your lack of wisdom, you only know how to attack, otherwise, I really can't catch you." Quote. Leon suddenly noticed a sharp pain in his hand, and then the hand was pierced by Magneto's cloak, and Magneto also wanted to take this opportunity to break through Leon's restrictions, but Leon was only slightly surprised, and the cracked place was reblocked by the pitch-black substance. "It turns out that your cloak contains metal, no wonder." He grinned, and this smile was very scary and full of weirdness. "Your ability, my subordinates." As soon as the words fell, his other hand was raised, and in an instant it turned into a long gun. The tip of the spear was dark without the slightest variety, but it was extremely sharp. "Say goodbye to the world." Without the slightest hesitation, he penetrated Magneto's head, blood burst out, and the spear even pierced the helmet on Magneto's head. Leon did not pull out the spear, but waited quietly. Time passed minute by minute, and half a minute later, Magneto's body disappeared, and a box appeared in his palm. Phew, it's so dangerous. It's good that the projected characters, there are no real people only and thoughts, only know to attack by instinct, otherwise, they will definitely not win this time. The body fell, slammed the ground with a bang, smashed the ground out of a big hole. Leon's hand dragging the box was shrinking. He put the box on the ground, and the body returned to its original appearance before opening the box. The strange thing is that there is only one box in this box, but there are quite a few cards in the box, and there are 13 cards when counted. Drip. Congratulations to the host for defeating the Magneto projection and obtaining the Magneto ability fragment 13. I have to say that high risk often means high reward. At least Leon is now very satisfied. 13 Magneto ability cards. He doesn't know how many % of all 13 cards are used, but he knows that for him now, it is definitely a surge in combat power. The next moment, as soon as he saw a flower in front of him, he had already come out of the projection space. With 13 ability cards in his hand, Leon took a deep breath and slapped one card on his body. The card disappeared instantly, and a heat flow appeared in the body. This heat flow was very solid, walking in every corner of the body, and the body was full of warmth. This feeling was no different from when using other ability cards before. Same feeling. Leon felt so, and then he used all the remaining 12 chapter cards on his body in turn, a process that lasted 10 minutes, and finally all the cards were used by him. Phew, he let out a long sigh of relief, and then looked to feel the change in himself. Physically, there is no change in strength, the 5 senses are still the same as before. It seems that there is no change in the body. There should be a change, it should be the superpower. He looked up and saw a wooden table with computers and other objects, many of them metal. Leon stretched out his hand to the table, his mind moved, and in this moment he had an extra feeling. He could already feel the metal within hundreds of meters around him, and he had a connection with those metals, as if as long as he had a thought, those metals could be controlled by him. The next moment, several pens containing metal components in the pen holder on the table floated, as if there was no gravity, slowly floating towards him. A single thought can have such an effect, and if I do my best, it is estimated that at least I can twist a building of 30 or 40 floors in a single motion. His awareness of his abilities was very clear, and now he wiggled with 5 fingers, and the pens were dripping and spinning in front of him. Haha, this feels amazing. He thought of something and quickly summoned the system light curtain. Host. Leon. Abilities. 113% Spiderman ability, 37% saber-toothed tiger ability, alien symbiote growing, 43% Magneto ability. Number of projections. 1. You can project twice a day. Good value. 1224. Kill. 173. 13 Magneto ability fragments. Let me have almost half of Magneto's ability. No wonder it is so powerful. It seems that in a short period of time, I still have to get all the Magneto's ability first, and even better to exceed it. Then he projected Iron Man, and in less than a minute in the projection space, he killed Iron Man's projection. With his current ability of 430,000 Magneto, it is really simple to deal with Tony Stark, who is all over the steel coat. Just using the magnetic control ability, he easily pinched it into meat puree. and then got a box with 3 grids, 1 grid containing 6 Tony Stark Genius Brain fragments, 3 Tony Stark Scientific Research Ability fragments, and a Mark 11 suit. Another good harvest. Leon is very satisfied. After using the cards, his mind has become clearer. He estimates that he should have surpassed Tony Stark in terms of IQ and brain power. This is important because a genius will often burst into a surprising spark of wisdom in itself. The Mark 11 suit, one of Tony Stark's main suits, is basically its usual model, whether it is functional or weapon loading, is the most cotton, but unfortunately the suit he obtained is still not equipped with weapons, and the spare energy is only enough for 10 minutes of use of the suit. This made him feel a little eager to get the arc reactor out. He does not look at the arc reactor, but at the technology and the degree of science and technology contained in it. He can fully understand the various aspects involved in the manufacture of the arc reactor, which is like a schoolboy, suddenly has a lot of knowledge in his head that does not belong to him, and Leon has to make it and then eat it thoroughly. Leon slept peacefully. The next day is usual school. This is his daily, very peaceful days, but also very comfortable. He is now absorbing all kinds of knowledge, all kinds of advanced technical books at an amazing speed. He bought a lot, and even downloaded a huge amount of technical information on the internet. He is ready to master this knowledge in the shortest possible time. Compared with powerful power, he actually values the genius of the mind, and there are many ways to obtain power, but IQ and intelligence are determined by nature, but now he can change this, so Leon does not want to waste such an opportunity, and also decides to project Iron Man a few more times later. Gwen didn't know what was going on. She was obviously not in a good mood today, and when she asked her why, she didn't want to say. Then Leon asked Peter Parker. This guy can't say why. As a passerby, Leon can see that the two are in an emotional crisis. This time Leon wanted to hit someone a little, but he remembered the ending of Gwen in the original book. Peter Parker is indeed a very likable character in Marvel, but when this person wants to become his brother-in-law, he also has no good interest and face. So he spoke directly to Peter Parker. I don't know what's going on between you and Gwen, but one thing I want to warn you is that if Gwen gets hurt because of you, I'll make you regret it. This is the second time I've said this to you, and I hope you remember it clearly. These are Leon's exact words. Peter Parker nodded and opened his mouth to say something, but in the end he didn't say it. Leon saw that he had something to hide, and after thinking about it, he guessed that Gwen was unhappy must be because of his Spider-Man's identity, so he didn't have much to say if his identity was not known. He had already received Tony Stark's 10 million yesterday, on time, and when he received the bank call, he was still excited for a while. This is $10 million, not to mention now, even in his previous life, he has never had so much money. No wonder it is very simple to say that capable people make money. After getting the money, he immediately found someone to register a company. The name is very simple, called Leon Technology, and then spent 700,000 yuan in the East City of New York to buy a small factory, and spent 3 days to add various high-tech equipment and materials to it. This will serve as his laboratory in the future, and what he first wants to do is to make the arc reactor, and then sort out the various technologies contained in the arc reactor in categories, do a technology accumulation, and then use this as a springboard to enter the high-tech industry. How to say that the poor rely on mutation, the rich rely on technology, and the genius mind can really do whatever he wants. Leon devoted himself to scientific research. His studies went smoothly, and the production of the Fangzhou reactor was also very smooth, which is why he sighed. The world slowly passed under Leon's hard work, and 3 days had passed in the blink of an eye, during which he projected a total of 6 more times, 3 times Magneto and 3 times Tony Stark. Because of the lack of killing value, he had to run out and destroy a small gang in New York. And the 6 projections also brought him great gains. He obtained a lot of ability fragments from Tony Stark's projection, among which the genius mind has added up to more than 12, the scientific research ability is also 13, and he also obtained a set of Mark 12 type suits. And the ability fragments obtained by Magneto have successfully made his ability surpass Magneto, and now he has 121% Magneto, which makes him feel that he is completely free of problems in the Marvel world to protect himself. In other aspects, although 3 days is not long, but it is enough for him to learn a lot of knowledge, but knowledge needs to be accumulated, and there is no obvious change in a short time, but the laboratory he built, in 3 days has almost the same appearance, and now he has begun to make the arc reactor. Leon Technologies company is just an empty shell now, but he is not in a hurry, everything always has an order, and he is confident that Leon Technology will develop. At this time, Leon was in front of the test bench, next to 2 high-precision robotic arms. He was manipulating the robotic arm, fiddling with parts on something the size of a fist. Hey, even if there is a full set of technology for manufacturing the arc reactor, but it is really not easy to get this thing out, especially if you do it alone. What basic parts have to be assembled by yourself? Why not directly use the company's scientific research power like Tony Stark? Too much loss. He has only built the core prototype of the arc reactor today, which is far from success, because the degree of technology contained in this thing is very high. Even Tony Stark in the aid has been tossed for a long time to come up. And he alone will inevitably consume more time. However, Leon is not in a hurry at all, and he knows the difficulty after getting started, but he is very handy. $10 million. He spent only more than $2 million, the rest of the money is used by him to purchase various materials. No wonder others say that scientific research is a gold-swallowing beast. He had just installed a metal object that resembled a hair when he heard the phone ringing on his body. Leon did not use his hand to take it, the phone on his body automatically floated, and then automatically answered. "Hi man, where are you now?" Tony Stark's voice came over the phone. "I'm busy." Leon continued his work, not stopping. "Well, see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, where we last met," Tony Stark said. "I see," Leon said. Then he hung up the phone and continued to concentrate on what was in front of him. When a person is invested in something, time tends to pass very quickly, and his vacation is spent on this, and it is only in the evening that he leaves the laboratory to go home, and to his surprise, Gwen is not at home. "Leon, do you know where Gwen went? Her phone couldn't get through," Helen asked. "What, didn't she contact you?" Leon wondered. "Yes, she went out this afternoon, but I can't contact her after that," Helen said a little anxiously. Young people in the United States are free because their parents have very little control in some areas, but Gwen's situation is obviously somewhat abnormal. Leon frowned, and then said, "What about George?" Quote, "He still has some cases to deal with, and he probably won't be back until later." Helen wrote, "I'll call first." Leon called Gwen's phone, but his call went unanswered. He heard the busy tone on the phone, his brows furrowed unconsciously, and he hugged Helen and said, "I'll go out to find her, don't worry if you are at home, I will bring her back." Quote, "Okay, remember to call me anytime," Helen explained. "I will." Leon drove out the door again, and after a little thought in the car, he dialed Tony Stark's phone and said, "I need your favor." Quote, "What? Help me check a phone number, I need to know the exact location of the owner of this phone now," Leon said directly. "Ah, okay, I'll do you a favor." Leon called Gwen's phone and said to the other side, 3 minutes man, then you will get the news, plus I'm at the party now, are you coming?" Quote, "Nope." Leon hung up the phone directly. In less than 3 minutes, Leon received a text message on his mobile phone, which marked a location, and Leon hit the steering wheel and drove towards it. The address on the phone is the west side, near the edge of the city center, which is not a commercial area, but a leisure area. "Dude, did you get the address?" On the way, Leon received a call from Tony Stark. Received. "Well, the place where this call was last located is there, good luck with the rest." Good. Leon hung up the phone, and the speed of the car was raised. He had a faint feeling of bad premonition, and then turned on the car channel on the road, tuned to the news station, and then heard the news broadcast inside. The power grid exploded on Kirkus Avenue in the West City District. An unknown person is wreaking havoc. Many people were injured at the scene. According to the reporter's investigation, the thug has the ability to control electric light. We call him Electric Lightman, and now Spiderman is over there to stop him. Please stay away from there as soon as possible in the Kirkus neighborhood. Leon was startled when he heard this, and then frowned. It's really what to think about. The Electric Light Man Max actually appeared so quickly. As soon as Leon turned the steering wheel, he rushed towards that side, and in just over 10 minutes, he had already reached the Kirkus neighborhood, and he heard the exclamations of the crowd from a distance, and many people were fleeing from that side. He parked the car in a secret place, then entered an alley, directly transformed into a blade form, climbed the wall to the roof, and quickly rushed towards the front. Leon landed on a tall building, and the show looked out, and soon saw the collapsed power grid, and two people fighting in a small square in the distance, one of whom was naturally Spider-Man, and the other was a strange figure with electric light all over his body. Electric Light Man Max. This guy has the ability to control the current. The whole body is surging high-voltage electricity. Ordinary people are absolutely dead and alive when touched, and Peter Parker is also carefully wrestling with him at this time, and did not make contact with him rashly. He didn't care about the two, but searched around. But after looking for a long time, he didn't see Gwen, and in desperation, he could only jump. Over there, the entanglement between Spider-Man and the Electric Light Man has entered a white heat. Spider-Man dodged the attacks of the Electric Light Man again and again with dexterity and speed, and the Electric Light Man's body from time to time burst out of electric light, like lightning raging around, steadily suppressing Spider-Man. Guys, take it easy, we're not enemies, haven't you always wanted to be noticed? You look at it now that you're the center of attention in all of New York, shall we stop? Quote. Peter Parker dodged and persuaded, but unfortunately the effect was not great, and the Electric Light Man had already been carried away by anger at this time. At this moment, Peter Parker suddenly turned his head and saw a pitch-black figure, wrapped in the night, falling down, smashing on the ground with a boom, smashing the ground cracked. Who are you? Peter Parker was shocked. One Electric Light Man was enough for him, and now another one appeared. He felt very big. The Electric Light Man did not care about this, and directly fired a thick electric light towards Leon, and hit Leon like lightning. There was a sudden feeling of paralysis in his body, but he did not notice that it was too uncomfortable, and this feeling could be endured. Where's Gwen Stacy? Leon did not care about the Electric Light Man and asked Peter Parker directly. What? Who are you? Peter Parker was flabbergasted. He saw that the person in front of him was in human form on the outside, but the eyes on his face and the cracked mouth were scary to look at, and this was a proper villain costume. It's me. The black matter on Leon's face in the blade state disappeared in half, revealing his general face, and Peter Parker was really shocked. Oh my God. He was very surprised, pointing at Leon for a long time and unable to speak. But at this time, the Electric Light Man came towards Leon again regardless of it, and at the same time punched him. Be careful, this punch is very fast as electric light. But Leon only turned slightly sideways, and avoided this swift punch, and at the same time grabbed the Electric Light Man's neck with one hand and smashed him directly to the ground. Quiet me, Leon said and stomped on his head, instantly crushing his entire head into powder. But the Electric Light Man just shook his body, and it dispersed into a blue mist, broke away from Leon's feet, and converged into a human form again in the distance. Leon did not hide his identity in front of Peter Parker, because now he has the ability to protect himself, and his identity has long been known on the S.H.I.E.L.D. side, and it is only a matter of time before he is exposed to others. Tell me, where is Gwen? Leon said. She's on the police's side. Peter Parker pointed in one direction. Leon saw a police car parked on the street in the distance, and then looked, and saw that Gwen was in the middle of the protection of a group of policemen. Leon was relieved. George is the police chief of New York. Gwen is also a second-generation officer. It is estimated that many police officers know her. He turned to look at Peter Parker and said, "Get her out of here." Quote. Peter Parker shook his head and said, "No, this person is dangerous, and if you don't solve him, there will be many people who will be injured." Quote. Leon's voice was hoarse. "Do as I say, this person is handed over to me." Quote. Peter Parker knew Leon's true identity, but he didn't know why, but he was a little strange familiarity with him. He just thought slightly, and suddenly said, "The person before is you." Quote. Leon knew what he was referring to and just nodded. Fact. Peter Parker cursed lowly, and then turned around without saying a word. He had contact with Leon's identity a few times, knew that he couldn't beat it, and now he knew Leon's true identity, and now there was no possibility of doing anything. So he went straight away. Anyway, he made up his mind to leave this mess to Leon. And Leon's side is very excited. not for anything else, just for the killing value. I want to kill the electric light man. The killing value should increase a lot. You must know that his killing value is now a little stretched. Every time he projects Magneto, the killing value consumed is quite a lot. The electric light man was now a little jealous of Leon because of his moment just now, hanging in the air and watching him, and Leon also looked up at him. Blade's face was grinning, and his scarlet tongue rolled slightly, revealing an oozing smile to him. The next moment, Leon moved. He flew up, directly towards the electric light man, extremely fast, even if the electric light man reacted quickly, but still did not dodge, was directly pounced by Leon in midair. As soon as Leon used his strength, he tore his body in half, and there were exclamations around him, and some people were still shouting, thinking that Leon had solved the electric light man, but in fact, the electric light man did not die, but scattered into electric ions and fled, and then reunited in the distance. Who are you? The electric light man roared angrily. He was angry that the people in front of him wanted to turn against him. Leon's voice was low. I'm the one who wants to kill you. Quote. As soon as the words fell, he pounced again. His huge body was extremely oppressive, but this time the electric light man was prepared and avoided it early, allowing him to pounce. Leon pounced several times in a row, and the electric light people avoided it at a very fast speed, and after a few times, everyone seemed to have confidence, and in the gap of avoidance, they also shot several thick electric rays at Leon, striking Leon like lightning. You can't hurt me. I'm going to make you ashes. I'm going to be the king of the world. The electric light man let out a roar. Leon's body shook, but he didn't mean to step back. You think I'm that little bug? You think you can be lawless with electricity? You underestimate the world. Quote. He grinned, then raised a hand and spread his 5 fingers at the electric man. The electric light man suddenly had a bad premonition, so he wanted to dodge, but suddenly found that his body did not know when he was actually imprisoned, as if the air around him turned into a hard wall, making him unable to move. It is not so much confinement as blockade, because Leon uses magnetic control ability to place a magnetic circle around his body, which can ensure that the electric light person cannot escape from it. The so-called electromagnetism does not divide the family. Magneto's ability is magnetic control, and magnetogenesis is also the standard performance of this ability. Electric light people do not know how to be evil, thinking that they can control electricity as invincible in the world, but just happen to meet Leon, who has indeed innately restrained him. Leon's mind moved slightly, and the electric light man floated straight towards him, but the electric light man's body couldn't stop struggling, but he couldn't break free from this shackle at all. Nope, no way, no. Quote. The electric light man's heart began to be afraid. He did not understand what was the reason for this, let alone what was happening to him, and what the power exerted on his body was. All kinds of questions made his heart tremble. His heart stirred, and seeing Leon's terrifying appearance now, the panic in his heart was self-evident. Nope, he yelled to express his inner fear, but Leon's hand didn't know when it was already on top of his head, and the two heads faced each other, and Leon suddenly grew his mouth and yelled at him. Ah! The electric light man shouted in horror. Ha ha ha! Leon smiled, and then said, let's say a final goodbye to this world. Quote. The electric light man was very frightened at this time. He struggled hard, but found that the cage that trapped him was unbreakable, and it seemed that there was no possibility of escape, which made him extremely desperate. He was originally just a very inconspicuous electrical engineer in the Ostanos group. Because of the accident to obtain superpowers, his personality is very withdrawn, basically zero popularity. After obtaining superpowers, the pressure of his past work has become a reason for him to retaliate. But now facing Leon, he found that he was nothing. Even if he had superpowers, he still looked like an ordinary person in front of Leon, an ordinary person who was defenseless. He was terrified, timid. No, don't, please, spare me. Quote. He shouted in horror. His body flashed with electricity, and the electric light under his azure skin was bright. Because of tension and fear, his translucent brain appeared with a reddish light, and his face had become distorted, very frightened. Leon's mouth was so grinning, saliva dripping from his scarlet tongue, which looked terrifying, which made Max's scalp tingle. He was unmoved, his 5 fingers gradually converged, and with his movements, the electric light man Max felt that the power imprisoned on his body was getting stronger and stronger, and he now only had one feeling, as if he was a meatball in a forging machine, to be squeezed into a meatloaf by huge pressure. No, no. The electric light man Max is still struggling madly, but the pressure from around him is increasing, and his body is gradually beginning to deform and shrink under this huge pressure, but due to his physical characteristics at this time, he is doomed to die in a short time by squeezing. So within a minute, his body has been crushed into a basketball-sized ball of light by huge pressure. This ball of light is shaking wildly, but it is no longer possible to make a sound from it, because Max is no longer in a human state at this time, but completely pressed into a ball of energy, although he is not dead, but this is a manifestation of life and death. Leon's hand squeezed violently, and a huge force suddenly appeared around the ball of light, and I saw that the ball of light instantly shrank dozens of times, and suddenly turned into a marble-sized pellet, blooming with dazzling brilliance, like a gemstone. The energy has been compressed to the extreme, but Leon found that this is not his limit, so he once again controlled with magnetic force to further compress that small blob of energy, and he had a hunch that as long as he applied another force, then this ball of light would break through the limit. And the consequences of breaking through the limit exploded with a pop. Goodbye. As soon as the words fell, the ball of light shrank into a point of light, and then as he expected, the ball of light shrank extremely much, and then broke through the limit. Leon could no longer maintain the pressure of this point of light, so all the energy that was compressed exploded in an instant. And Max, in this explosion, turned into a brilliant firework, and instantly disappeared into nothingness. The people in the distance only saw a brilliant flash of brilliance, and then everything was restored, and there was still the shadow of the lightning man. Ooh! The people around them cheered, and for them, this time the crisis was safe again. Leon glanced around. His terrifying appearance immediately made the cheers around him stop, and he saw that Peter Parker had jumped to the top of a tall building, while Gwen was still among the policemen. Fact, this product actually left by itself. Leon was a little unhappy, but after thinking about it, he guessed Peter Parker's thoughts, which was nothing more than not wanting to expose his identity, and because of his own intervention, Gwen would not be in danger. Forget it, I'm too lazy to care about him. Leon kicked his feet. The ground shook, and he had already jumped high, jumped to the wall of a tall building on the side, and then quickly climbed up the wall, and disappeared from everyone's sight in a blink of an eye. Then he landed in the alley before, returned to his original appearance, drove to Gwen's side, got out of the car and shouted from a distance, "Hey, Gwen, why are you here?" Quote. Gwen seemed to be thinking something, heard the voice, saw him, said a few words to the policeman next to him, and came to him. Leon frowned. Why are you here? And you're a phone. Quote. The phone is pregnant, and the one just now is you, right? Gwen said directly. Leon didn't know what to say all of a sudden. Is a woman's sixth sense so terrifying? He shook his head and said, Don't worry about this, Helen, and worry about you. I think you should go back with me. Quote. Helen nodded, unexpectedly did not delve into it, just looked at her worried appearance and did not know what she was thinking. Leon didn't want to bother, but Gwen spoke on his own. I feel like I'm not a good fit for Peter Parker. What? Leon almost drove the car into a ditch. He guessed what might have gone wrong between Gwen and Peter Parker, but he didn't know what the specific problem was, and he didn't bother to ask, so he was a little silent along the way. Gwen said to himself, Peter Parker is a very kind man and a man with a great sense of justice. His uncle gave him a lot of teachings, and he often said that the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. I understand him very well, but his broad sense of kindness and justice makes me very stressed. Compared to him, I am like a clown, and he is more like a saint. Quote. I don't know if it was because of some sadness, she actually cried. Leon had to pull out a tissue and hand it to her, while Gwen continued to immerse herself in her thoughts. So I decided to leave him. Fortunately we didn't get along for long, and such a breakup didn't hurt me. Leon agrees with what she said. Peter Parker is very kind and righteous. As a hero he is qualified, but as a boyfriend, he is very unqualified. Such people tend to live very tired, and it is also a debt to his family for a long time. Already decided? Leon asked. Yes. Gwen nodded firmly. Leon bowed his head slightly and smiled at her. Welcome to the ranks of singles. Quote. Gwen punched him, but didn't speak again. The two returned home silently all the way. At home he told his family about going out tomorrow, and if nothing else, George was understanding, Helen was worried, and Gwen was thoughtful. Fortunately, he has already taken a leave of absence from school in advance, so it is not abrupt. Adults in the United States are free. Basically, many of them go out to pursue their own lives as soon as they become adults, rather than living with their parents. The Stacy family has a somewhat Oriental family atmosphere, so Leon still needs to consult his adoptive parents about some things. He still hides his identity from George and Helen, not unwilling to say, but he doesn't know how to speak. He always feels that he lacks an opportunity, but fortunately he is not in a hurry. There will always be a day. After 12 o'clock, he projected Magneto again, obtained his ability fragments, and made himself reach the level of 147% of Magneto's ability, and then projected Tony Stark again, still obtained Genius Brain ability fragments, as well as Scientific Research ability fragments, but unfortunately did not get the suit this time, and felt a little loss. The next morning after breakfast, he said goodbye to his family and drove alone to the place where he had last met Tony Stark. The car was parked in the parking lot. He walked into the factory by himself, glanced up, and he keenly spotted at least 7 hidden cameras. The first thing he saw was not Tony Stark, but Phil Coulson, and with him was a woman with long burgundy hair and a shawl, wearing a close-fitting black jacket. Inside was a tight low-cut t-shirt, and the lower body was a pair of tight black pants, more than 1.7 meters, stepping on a pair of half-barreled night boots. The whole person looked tall and pretty. Yes, this woman feels pretty from the first glance, and exudes this feeling all the time. Without asking, Leon has already guessed who the woman in front of him is, an active character in the entire Marvel, a generation of otaku men and women, Natasha Romanov. This is Natasha, the protector of your mission. You need to go with her, and your character is to keep her safe. Phil Coulson said. Hey, little one. Natasha held out her hand to Leon. Instead of ignoring Natasha, Leon asked Coulson, what about Tony Stark? Quote, he can't come. Coulson shrugged. Before Leon could ask why, the phone rang, and it was Tony Stark's point. Hey man, have you seen anyone? See you, Leon said. Okay, do what Coulson said. I have to fix a section of submarine cable. Why would I do this kind of work? Tony Stark said and hung up the phone. Leon's eyes jumped. If it weren't for the $10 million, he really didn't want to deal with this person, too annoying. Natasha didn't care about Leon's cold attitude towards her at all, but instead circled around Leon and said, little one, are you an adult? Quote. Leon suddenly turned his head and asked her, how many relationship experiences have you had? Quote. What? Natasha said unexpectedly. I mean, how many men have you slept with? Leon said. Ha ha ha, little one, I'm interested in you. Natasha smiled very naturally. Natasha's hand pressed lightly on Leon's chest and smiled at him, a smile of its own maturity. Are you trying to soak me? She asked. Coulson rolled his eyes on the side. He knew too well what kind of personality this woman was. To put it bluntly, she was good at disguise. Ordinary people couldn't figure out what kind of woman she was, and everyone who dealt with her had to fight with 12. He felt that Leon would definitely suffer a loss at Natasha's hands, but Leon's performance was very direct, holding Natasha's white chin with one finger and laughing, will you agree? Quote. Natasha's starry eyes flickered, but she tilted her head without a trace, her chin left with Leon's fingers, and then said, who knows, maybe it's possible. Quote. Leon raised his eyebrows. Just now when he was holding up her chin, Leon looked at her jade-like neck, and suddenly wondered if it would be a pity if this neck was screwed off, but he didn't expect that the other party actually noticed this, and skimmed his head without a trace, but on the surface it was light and breezy. This woman's sixth sense is actually so keen. Leon was a little surprised. Natasha's beautiful eyes glanced lightly, and she smiled and looked forward to life, and her beauty was fully displayed. Okay, let's talk about the mission. Coulson did not see the meaning of the interaction between the two just now, so he said directly, Leon, you need to go to India with Natasha from today to find Bruce Banner there. You need to protect Natasha, and then when necessary, follow Natasha's orders. It is best not to conflict with the target person. Quote. Leon nodded and said, I'm okay, when will I leave? Quote. You have to ask her, my mission is over, good luck to you. Coulson said and waved his hand and left, leaving only Leon and Natasha. Natasha suddenly showed a smile and said, "Did you just try to kill me?" Quote. "How come? You think too much, just a little curious about your identity." Leon shrugged. "Curious about my identity? My identity is simple, just an ordinary agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Quote. "The agent is real, and it is difficult to say whether ordinary is not ordinary," Leon said. Then, without waiting for Natasha to reply, he added, "Are we standing over here? What time is departure?" Quote. The smile on Natasha's face disappeared, and the speed of change was amazing, and she said seriously, "Since you have accepted this task, then you have to obey my arrangement next. If you can't do it, you can leave now." Quote. Leon nodded, did not refute anything. He still had this ethic of being trusted to be loyal to others. "Okay, let's go get the equipment first," Natasha said as she darkened somewhere on the wall of the factory building, and then the passage to the ground cracked, and she walked down first, followed by Leon. In the eye was a white corridor, brightly lit. She pressed on the corridor wall again, and a door appeared on the wall next to it, and inside the door was an arsenal. "That's right, it's the arsenal, pistols, automatic rifles, and even RPGs, Leon is an eye-opener. You have to change your clothes. This time there is also a special operations squad. You need to be with them, hide in it, and it can play a role in key moments," Natasha said. Saying that, she took out a set of special operations clothes from the display case and threw it to Leon. Leon nodded and was not pretentious, and changed his clothes in front of her. His muscles are not exaggerated, there is no sense of expansion, but each piece is like steel cast iron, angular. Wearing clothes may look a little thin, but as soon as the muscles come out, it can definitely attract a lot of attention. Natasha whistled, "Not bad." Quote. "Thanks for the compliment." Leon is not the kind of personality who can't walk when he sees a woman, and when he doesn't understand Natasha's nature, he still gets along with caution. He quickly changed his clothes, and equipped with a full set of equipment, a Scar H rifle and 6 magazines, an M45A1 pistol and 3 magazines, then 3 grenades, 2 shock bombs, 2 smoke grenades, a miniature laser rangefinder, a radar helmet, a laser friend or foe identifier, and several other things. Cool. Natasha held her arms and nodded, because this action inevitably made her pair look more towering, and Leon looked at it twice. Obviously, Leon's gaze did not escape Natasha's eyes, but she just smiled confidently and said, "We will now set off to meet with your other companions." Quote. "Okay, you can arrange it." Leon nodded. Together with Natasha, he drove to another military base, where a dozen special operators had been waiting early. Leon silently followed Natasha, met with the people, and then boarded a military transport plane together, all of them silent during the process, and so did Natasha. The group got on the plane. The special operators were checking their equipment. Natasha changed her clothes before boarding, a set of black tight combat uniforms, set off her alluring figure, set off vividly, looks amorous and sultry. Anyway, except for the pilot, all the other members of the special operations team on the plane glanced at her from time to time. The plane took off quickly, and Leon also knew the coordinates of this time, in a village in the northern mountains of India, and the target person was hidden in it. Halfway through, Natasha touched Leon with her arm. "They're all looking at me, why don't you look at me?" Quote. "I have to turn my head when I see your words, I think it's troublesome." Yes, a very hardcore explanation, until it choked Natasha, and then said faintly after a while, "Do you know that communicating with women like this is easy to have no friends, especially without a girlfriend?" Quote. "It won't." Leon shook his head resolutely. "I soaked the first chick at the age of 13, and now I have rich emotional experience, and the women developed by my hands are not 10 but also 8. You are so interested in me, do you want to develop a relationship with me?" Quote. With that, he turned his head to look at Natasha. His face wore a tactical eyepiece, but Natasha could feel a burning gaze from under his dark eyepiece, and couldn't help but smile. "You are such an interesting fellow, I know your Chinese culture, this is the desire to catch in the 36 schemes, right?" Quote. Huh. Leon was surprised. Natasha is a very beautiful woman, especially as an agent. She knows how to exert her charm, although Leon can't walk the road without seeing beautiful women, but in the face of beautiful women, there is still an attitude of appreciation. "You are very smart, but unfortunately, I have no plans to soak you at the moment, maybe one day, I will invite you for a drink." Leon shrugged. Natasha hid her lips and chuckled. immediately attracting everyone's attention, and she suddenly leaned into Leon's ear and whispered, "What if I don't agree?" Quote. Leon suddenly turned his head. The two faced each other, each could feel each other's breathing. Leon's head suddenly leaned forward a centimeter, which made the two faces closer. From the perspective of others, they thought that the two had kissed. Leon didn't move, Natasha didn't move, and the two seemed to be engaged in a silent battle. "Who can say exactly what will happen in the future?" Leon said suddenly. Natasha silently avoided the back, facing Leon's domineering approach. She was finally defeated. She shrugged her shoulders and didn't speak again, but the smile on her face didn't diminish, and the two of them made the other team members feel a little unhappy, but Natasha was the commander of this operation, and they had to hold back even if they were unhappy. The next way was silent. 10 hours later the plane landed. It was morning when it left in New York, and it was still morning when it landed, and the jet lag was a very magical thing. Next, the group flew in a military helicopter for more than 3 hours to a mountain village in northern India, settled in a private house, and Natasha began to set up the task. Next is the classified mission. We leave at 8 o'clock in the evening, and after arriving at the target location, you need to hide around the target location and provide fire support when necessary. Saying that, he said to Leon again, "You have two characters, the first is to cooperate with them, and the second, it's to protect me." Quote. "I'm okay with that." Leon nodded. He was ready along the way. "Well, the task arrangement is like this for the time being. Now adjust the communication channel, keep the channel usual, you can take a break first." After Natasha finished arranging, she lay down on a camp bed on the side to rest, and the rest of the people gathered in twos and threes, talking in a low voice. "That girl is so hot, I bet $100, I can get that girl's phone, can anyone bet?" A special combat member whispered and laughed with the person next to him, which immediately aroused the interest of others. The corners of Leon's mouth turned up slightly, and he sat down by the wall, not caring about those people. A moment later, I saw a man come to Natasha's side, and when she was about to speak, Natasha opened her eyes and said, "Soldier, I need to rest, please don't disturb me." Quote. The man went down in ashes, which immediately caused a burst of laughter. Leon smiled silently, thinking that these people were still too tender. He didn't have the heart to say anything more to Natasha, and this was just the right time to recuperate. Leon was very calm, did not communicate with these team members, but seemed a little out of place, but he didn't care. Natasha was also very quiet, except for the first person wanted to talk to the wall, then no one was willing to step forward and lose face. Soon after dark, Natasha looked at the time and found that it was past 7 o'clock, so she said, "Assemble, check the equipment, and set off." Quote. The team members who were sitting scattered quickly reacted, moved in an extremely orderly manner, and the group set off, drove a Humvee and 2 armored vehicles, and finally reached their destination in almost half an hour. This is the mountainous area. The dirt road in summer is dusty, and the small mountain village can be seen in the distance, and the group gets out of the car according to the steps prepared in advance. Natasha and Leon walk side by side, and the others scatter from all sides, the two aiming for a dilapidated adobe house in front of them. Everyone is hidden, the target person is inside. Check the firearms for the last time, be careful and be on guard, no matter what happens, do not shoot without my order. Natasha said in the middle of the covert communicator. Understood. Received. Everything is set. Natasha nodded to Leon, then took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Her face was calm, but Leon could detect the solemnity in her heart, although it was not nervous, but it did not look like it was a little earlier. Knock knock. She knocked on the door. There was a slight sound of footsteps in the house, and a moment later the door was opened, and inside was a middle-aged man with glasses who looked ordinary, dressed in casual clothes, but a little dirty, and the whole person looked a little sloppy. After he saw Natasha, his brows furrowed, and he shook his head a little helplessly. "I hid here, can you still find it?" Quote. Yes, if we want to find someone, as long as this person is on Earth, there is no possibility of not finding it. Natasha smiled at him and added, "Drive. Bruce Banner, don't you invite us in and sit down." Quote. Bruce Banner glanced at Leon, who carried the rifle behind his back, indicating that he had no malice. "He's my bodyguard, please don't worry," Natasha said. "Would bodyguards dress like this?" Bruce Banner asked with a smile. "Because I know what I'm up against, I have to be careful," Natasha said. What the two seemed to be talking about was irrelevant, but in fact it was secretly clever, and Leon let himself appear harmless to humans and animals, standing there without speaking. Bruce Banner glanced at the two and shrugged, then come in. Quote. Natasha smiled, and the two walked in with Bruce Banner. The room was very simple, a bed, a table and a stool, and there was a room next to it, but the door was locked. Tell me about your intentions. Bruce Banner wrote. We would like to invite you to join. Natasha only spoke. The words were interrupted. Bruce Banner said, this is impossible, you know very well how terrible the monster in my body is, and the reason why I hid here is also clear to you. If you don't think of a bigger mess at the time, I suggest you give up. Quote. Leon glanced at Natasha, but her face remained unchanged, still smiling. We are about to face a disaster that is about to sweep the world. At this time, you should convince the monster inside you. Quote. Bruce Banner didn't answer her, but came to the window and looked out, and seemed to point out, this place is already surrounded, right? Quote. No, it's just the three of us. Natasha said. Who are you? Natasha Romanov. If I refuse, are you going to kill me? You know that if you want to kill me, it's not easy. Quote. No, of course not, I'm here on behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bruce Banner rubbed his palms flatly, his expression was also very indifferent, and asked, how did you find me? Quote. We've been keeping track of your whereabouts, Doctor, but we didn't bother you, and even drove away some uninvited guests for you. Natasha said. Why, Nick Fury trusts you, that's all, but now you have to come with us. Natasha said. What if I say no? I'll convince you. The atmosphere was silent, and after a long time, Bruce Banner lowered his eyes and said, what if that monster refuses? Quote. You haven't had an accident in more than a year, I'm sure you can control that monster, and I want to show you something. Natasha pulled out a cell phone with a picture on it, and Leon glanced at it, which showed a blue cube. Cosmic cube. Leon recognized the thing. We need the technology you have in your hands to find it. Natasha said. Aren't you trying to trick me into locking me up when I go back? Bruce Banner asked. Of course not. At this moment, Bruce Banner suddenly took a step forward and yelled at Natasha, don't try to lie to me. Quote. Natasha quickly drew her gun, and one of the men moved faster than her, and appeared next to Bruce Banner with the muzzle of the rifle at her temple. That's what you want. Bruce Banner's face was ugly at this time, and Natasha's face was serious. Haha, that monster is going to, it's out, roar. Quote. Roar. A loud roar, the sound was huge, like muffled thunder. Leon was startled in his heart, and at the same time heard Natasha's voice in his ears. Shoot. Leon directly pulled the trigger, and the rifle bullet carried huge kinetic energy out of the chamber, directly hitting Bruce Banner's temple, knocking his head crooked, but there was no wound on his head, and the whole person fell to the ground without moving. Leon frowned. He had seen the Avengers, and originally thought that he would not make a move with Bruce Banner this time, but he would never have thought that Natasha actually let him shoot. Is it because of myself that the plot has changed? He felt that this was very possible, so he threw the idea aside, carefully guarding. At this time, the special operators hidden outside rushed in, some guarded the door, and a few people came to be on guard, and Leon looked at Natasha, and Natasha's face at this time was not good, very serious. Hey, quote. In a low laugh, Bruce Banner braced himself and looked up at Natasha. Sure enough, you are all a bunch of liars. Quote. Doctor. Bruce Banner, believe me, we don't want to be your enemy, as long as we don't overreact. Natasha said. You have already angered that monster, and what happens next is beyond my control. Bruce Banner said. The body began to swell, and at the same time the skin also showed a green color, and in a blink of an eye, the clothes were torn by the swollen muscles, and it suddenly became extremely terrifying. Snap. Without Natasha's mouth, the special operators vented their bullets to Bruce Banner, one bullet after another, deep into the flesh, but in a blink of an eye, it was squeezed out by the muscles, and Bruce Banner's body had expanded to more than 2 meters tall at this time, strong as a monster. Roar. At this time, he was already in a complete Hulk state, and he let out a roar, like a thunder explosion, shaking people's eardrums with pain. Natasha's face changed drastically, and she hurriedly said, retreat quickly. Get out of here. Quote. Leon had already finished firing a shuttle bullet. Seeing this situation, he directly threw away the firearm, took out a grenade and pulled the fuse, and then threw it directly into the mouth of the Hulk, and at the same time, his figure flashed, stopped Natasha and hugged him, broke through the wall and rushed out. As for the life or death of those special operators, he didn't care, his character was to protect Natasha, and that's it. Retreat. All retreat. He's not something you can compete with. Natasha called into the communicator. But it was too late. Leon clearly heard the screams behind him, and the sound of bones shattering, followed by an explosion. He took the opportunity to look back, and saw smoke coming from the Hulk's mouth, breaking through the wall and rushing towards him. The grenade blew a piece of his jaw, but in the blink of an eye he was already back to his original state, and his resilience was amazingly strong. He didn't care if the special operators were dead or alive, but watching the Hulk roar and chase, he had to protect Natasha. Where to go now? Leon asked suddenly. Don't tell me you're not ready, he said again. Natasha also showed a nervous expression on her face at this time, and glanced at the Hulk who was chasing her. Go south, escape to the nearest city, where there are our people. Quote. Are you crazy? The nearest city is less than 100 kilometers, do you think we can run away? That 10 million is really hard to take. Quote. Leon suddenly felt the strong wind behind him, and without thinking about it, he held Natasha and rolled to the side, only to hear a boom. The ground was smashed out of a large hole. Leon narrowly avoided the Hulk's blow. Don't want to, you run away yourself, I'll restrain him. Leon threw her to the side. With very clever force, Natasha flew out more than 10 meters away, rolled on the spot and stabilized herself, and when she was about to speak, she saw the Hulk actually rushing towards her, and she was suddenly shocked. Hey, your opponent is me. Leon appeared between the two at an unknown time, facing the Hulk with a smile on his face, looked back at Natasha, smiled a little mockingly, and then turned back and punched the Hulk. At the same time as this punch, his body also began to expand, and the pitch-black substance quickly wrapped his whole body, and in an instant, his body expanded to about the same size as the Hulk. Boom! The Hulk's fist collided with Leon's fist in the state of the blade, and the collision triggered a surging wave of chi, like an explosion. Leon's body took a step back, and the Hulk flew out upside down and smashed into the ground in the distance at a very fast speed, smashing the ground into collapse. Fortunately, in his blade state, his strength exceeds 100 tons, and he can suppress him for the time being. Leon knew it secretly. Roar! The Hulk roared angrily, slapped his hands on the ground, and his whole body flew up, smashing straight towards Leon, and Leon did not dodge, and faced the falling Hulk and threw another punch. Boom! There was another muffled thunderous collision. The ground under Leon's feet was cracked by the huge pressure, and his legs were deeply sunk in it, but he withstood the Hulk and the blow, and after the two collided, they held each other's hands, forming a wrestling situation. Natasha had fled 30 meters away at this time, and looking back at the situation of the two, she was immediately stunned. She was shocked not only by the horror of the Hulk, but also by Leon's state at this time, and seeing that Leon could actually compete with the Hulk, she was almost speechless. This, how can it be? She muttered. Me, Leon roared. His voice was low, and at the same time his arms were forceful, directly lifting the Hulk's majestic body, and then fell over his shoulder and threw it out. This guy, the more angry the more powerful, in the blink of an eye, this guy's strength actually increased. Leon was secretly shocked in his heart, and at the same time saw Natasha still standing there stupidly, and immediately became angry, and roared, "Silly woman, don't run fast now, are you dead?" Quote. Shouted by Leon, Natasha immediately came to her senses and said, "Be careful." Quote. Then ran away without looking back. She knew that the battle between the two, she couldn't intervene at all. This is not a level of battle. If she is involved in it, the end will definitely not be better than those special combat members. Roar. The Hulk rolled over, patted his chest and roared. Leon bent down, and suddenly rushed towards the Hulk. He decided to go head-to-head with the Hulk. He in the state of the blade, his strength is more than 10 times stronger than in the ordinary state. Just in terms of strength, he is much more than the current Hulk. Punched out fiercely, directly hitting the Hulk's head, knocking him backwards and flying out, and then Leon got up again, pressed the Hulk under him, pinched his neck with one hand, and greeted him desperately on the head with the other. Bang, bang, bang. A dozen punches in a row were fast and ruthless, and I directly saw that Hulk hit dizzy, and at the same time roared angrily. Leon felt the power coming from the Hulk, which was gradually increasing due to his anger, and his heart was secretly shocked. He didn't stand up. Every punch was very fierce. Even if the Hulk was copper-clad and iron-boned, he was still beaten by his head and bloodied, and even his skull was shattered. But even so, the Hulk is still struggling, wanting to turn over from Leon's control, but his strength has not overwhelmed Leon in a short time, so he can only be pressed and beaten by Leon like this, very angry and aggrieved. Make you struggle. Bang. Make you angry. Bang. Makes you scary. Bang. Make you ugly. Bang. Make your green person panic. Bang. Punch after punch, punch to the bone, bombarded the Hulk's head like a heavy hammer. Green blood splashed out and flowed all over the place. Roar. The Hulk was so angry that his strength surged, and Leon immediately felt that his resistance had become much stronger. This guy is really a hanging ratio, and this increase in power is too exaggerated. Leon was shocked, and his fisted hand shook, and it immediately turned into a long knife and stabbed towards the Hulk's chest. Poof! Hulk's invulnerable chest was pierced by Leon's blade, and with a fierce force, he pierced directly into his chest and penetrated from behind it. Leon smashed Hulk's body with a head hammer, and said at the same time, "I know you understand my words, your strength comes from anger, the more angry you are, the greater the power will be, but I can still suppress you for at least a minute. If you are similar, then I will cut off your head. If you don't want to die, give me obedient change back." Quote. Leon pulled out the blade, and the blood-stained blade was across Hulk's neck, and Hulk gasped. His eyes were raging, staring at Leon deadly, his chest rose and fell rapidly, and he roared, "I will kill you." Quote. After this roar, his strength to resist became much smaller, and then it seemed to be quiet, but when Leon moved away from the blade, a huge force suddenly erupted from the Hulk, which directly flipped Leon out, flew out hundreds of meters away, and hit the ground fiercely. Ahem, this is better than, it can actually be tricky. Quote. Leon was kicked in the chest by the Hulk, and the entire chest was collapsed by the distance blow, and the injury had been repaired after he got up, and at this time the oncoming Hulk had rushed over. Leon was completely deceived by Hulk's humble appearance, and he would never have thought that this product would actually be fraudulent, and it was very insidious, and he gave him such a look while he was not paying attention. At this moment, the Hulk flew over, like a cannonball towards him. Leon was furious, followed by a roar. His arm suddenly swelled, and suddenly became like a heavy hammer, carrying the distance of his whole body to erupt towards the falling Hulk. Boom! There was another deafening muffled sound. The shock wave generated by the collision of the two made the surrounding grass and trees shattered. Leon's body sank into the ground again and again, directly into the waist. His arm was suddenly twisted into a twist by the huge force, and the original shape could not be seen. The Hulk flew out backwards again, smashing the ground out of a large hole again, all of a sudden like an earthquake, shaking up a puff of floating dust and flying ash, and one of his arms was also twisted, but it recovered in a blink of an eye. Leon did the same. He got up from the deep ground, his other arm also began to swell, and at this time, it looked like he had two heavy hammers hanging from his body, roared at the Hulk, and then rushed like a tank. The Hulk roared, his voice was like thunder, and he rushed towards Leon without fear. Natasha had already run more than 100 meters away, and when she looked back, she saw that two humanoid monsters were on a rampage, destroying both stones and trees along the way, and the destructive power was terrifying. She opened her mouth and looked shocked, and only then did she understand what kind of terrifying power was hidden in the little man's body, and it was unbelievable that she could face Hulk gang. Roar, roar, it's like two beasts, running in the primeval wilderness. The distance is closer in a blink of an eye, and then another collision occurs. Leon's heavy punch was extremely furious, and after the blade fused, his strength increased by more than 10 times, more than 100 tons of distance, making him look like a fierce machine, and every punch fell down was as terrifying as a pile driver. Hulk's whole body is green, because of anger, and his strength has greatly increased, although there is still a slight gap with Leon, but the gap in strength is rapidly narrowing. His power comes from anger. The more angry, the stronger the power. He is like a spring. When the pressure reaches the limit, the counterattack will be more terrifying. Boom, boom, bang bang, collision after collision. The sound wave is deafening, smoke and dust are billowing out, the ground seems to be smashed by meteors, splashing the sky with floating dust. Far away can only see two huge figures, in the smoke and dust collision rolling, like a beast fighting. "Oh my God, what two monsters!" Natasha muttered, stunned, and then hurried to flee into the distance. This is not a place where she can stay. It is not safe within 100 meters, or the farther away the better. In the field, Leon and Hulk in the Blade state are still colliding, but the more he fights Leon, the more frightened he is, because he feels that the power on Hulk's body has become stronger and stronger, and it is estimated that in a minute at most, Hulk's strength can surpass himself. What a hell of an ability. Leon did not lose his mind. On the contrary, he was very sober, knowing that the longer the time dragged on, the more difficult it would be for him to suppress the other party in terms of strength, so he decided to change. As soon as the thought moved, within 3 kilometers of his center, the earth on the ground began to churn, and all the metal in the small village rose to the sky, while fine black sand oozed out of the dirt and gathered towards him. He used his magnetic control ability to extract all the iron elements in the land within 3 kilometers, and from a distance, black smoke and dust drifted around him, gathering towards him, and Natasha, who was running, was suddenly startled, and when he looked back, he saw that Leon's body seemed to have grown again, and there was an extra pair of metal armor outside his body. This is. Before she could return to her senses, she saw the black sand in the sky gather together, turning silvery white in color, forming a circular discus with a diameter of 5 meters and a thickness of 30 centimeters. Then the original discus separated into more than a dozen points, creeping like a liquid, and then each of them transformed into a long knife, shining with a cold light. Leon's body flew up, floating in midair tens of meters high, and with a wave of his hand, the dozen long knives slashed down towards the Hulk. Poof! With a sound of sharp weapons entering the flesh, wounds appeared on Hulk's body, and even some places were pierced, and blood flowed. Roar! The Hulk roared in pain, and smashed several long knives with a fist, but the long knives recovered in the next moment, hanging in the air and pointing at him. Leon said in a low voice, "If you resist again, I will cut off your head, and this time I will do what I say." Chapter 31. Leon became serious. He had the ability to have more than Magneto's victory. When Magneto was victorious, he could easily uproot the Golden Gate Bridge, he could also lift a stadium of 60,000 people into the air, and he could throw missiles and submarines into the sky. And with a stronger ability than Magneto, Leon can naturally do this. He wrapped himself in metal and flew into the air, and now the Hulk couldn't help him, and then attacked with a blade formed by countless iron sand, so that he had an innate advantage. If you are strong, you have to drink foot wash in this situation. Leon intends to let the Hulk try how he felt when he faced Magneto for the first time, and he imagined that this time would definitely impress the Hulk. Roar! In response to him was still a roar. Hulk was untamable, punched again, and smashed several long knives. I have to say that the strength has reached this level, and ordinary things are already difficult to stop. As soon as Leon's mind moved, the blade automatically recovered, and the sharp blade flashed with cold light, and at a very fast speed. Before the Hulk could react, it pierced his throat, and even cut off half of his neck, and blood gushed like a fountain. Roar! Even with this injury, the Hulk was still brave, directly pulling out the long knife inserted in his neck and breaking it, and the wound recovered in a few seconds. Leon grinned, his appearance became very ferocious, and with a move of his hand, those long knives suddenly split apart, turning into a narrow and thin blade with a handle of only a dozen centimeters long, densely packed with hundreds of them. With a wave of his hand, all the thin blades fell towards the Hulk like rain, and he bore the brunt. The sound of popping was endless, and a thin blade cut through his skin, flesh and blood, internal organs, and even bones, replaced by ordinary people, and would definitely turn into meat mud under such an attack. But Hulk roared in pain, covered his head with his arms and retreated. Blood burst out of his body, staining the ground. He did not fall, but his body swelled slightly because of anger, and he slammed his fist, boomed, and the fierce wave of chi smashed those thin blades. Leon waved his hand again. All the thin blades condensed again. With this ability, at least metal substances, then don't want to escape his control. Even in the state that has been shattered, he can still condense it again. Quote, "Ha!" With a harsh whistle, a thin blade took shape again, still striking towards the Hulk. Roar! The Hulk roared and jumped up in anger, wanting to punch Leon, which was fierce. But what stood in front of him was a discus, which fell directly on his head. Boom! The Hulk was smashed, and then the discus split apart, condensing into a thin blade that pierced through him. Poof! With a sound of flesh, the wounds on Hulk's body became even more. Roar! The Hulk fought to the death and did not retreat, or in this state, he had no concept of retreat at all. Leon saw this, and finally had a murderous intention in his heart, flicked his fingers slightly, several thin blades were fitted together, condensed into a thicker long blade, at a speed that was difficult to capture with the naked eye, directly poured into the Hulk's brain, and suddenly brought a large amount of blood. As soon as Hulk's body froze, he stood straight in place, and then his body fell to the ground with a soft body, and finally threw himself on the street. Leon stretched out his hand, and the metal began to deform, eventually forming a metal ring around the Hulk's neck, and then the metal ring supported the Hulk and floated. At this time, there was a blood hole in the Hulk's brain, and the wound was terrifying, a penetrating injury, but Leon could detect that the Hulk was not dead, because the wound on his brain door was being quickly repaired at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in less than 3 seconds, the terrifying wound had disappeared. Hulk opened his eyes still full of anger, but Leon said, "Last chance, if you resist again, I will unscrew your head with my own hands." Quote. It seems to have sensed Leon's inner killing intent, and this time was different. Before the Hulk's face, distorted by anger, finally calmed down, took a deep look at Leon, and then his body began to shrink, and his greenish skin began to become normal, until it finally returned to the appearance of Bruce Banner. At this time, Bruce Banner was trapped by the iron ring around his neck, and hovered in the air like this. Because of the tightening of the iron ring, his breathing was a little difficult, and he said with difficulty, "That thing has already admitted defeat." Quote. Leon put him on the ground, the iron ring scattered, and finally turned into a large piece of iron powder and fell to the ground. Bruce Banner covered his neck and coughed for a long time before he said with difficulty, "Are you a monster? Why can you defeat even the monsters in my body?" Quote. "I'm not a monster, I'm just a person who is stronger than the monster inside you." Leon also returned to normal at this time, and he smiled and said to Bruce Banner, "Now consider whether to cooperate with us." Quote. He used the word us very simply, because his mission this time was both to protect Natasha and to represent S.H.I.E.L.D., which he still had. Bruce Banner coughed a few times, because Fang was wrapped around his neck by an iron ring, making him very uncomfortable now, and finally slowed down before saying, "I agree, at this time I have no reason to refute anything you have proved with practical actions, I have no choice." Quote. Leon shrugged and said, "That's fine, I'm just collecting money to do things. As for your affairs with S.H.I.E.L.D., it has nothing to do with me, and after this matter, I'm not sure if you will see me again." Quote. Hearing him say this, Bruce Banner looked up differently and asked, "You're not from S.H.I.E.L.D.? Quote. "Did I say I was from S.H.I.E.L.D.? Leon said. "Then why are you helping them?" Bruce Banner asked again. "Without him, because $10 million. Leon smiled. Bruce Banner smiled bitterly. At this time he had no interest in talking anymore, just grabbed the waist of his torn pants and sat on the ground. This time was a big blow to him. He knew how powerful the monster in his body was, and the destructive power on the surface was amazing, but just such a monster, this time was subdued by the man in front of him, which made him very silent. Leon didn't care what he thought, so he said to the communicator, "The target mission has stabilized, you can come over." Quote. "What, are you sure?" On the other end of the communicator, Natasha asked. "Yes, it's already safe." "Okay, I'll be right there." Leon did this without avoiding Bruce Banner, and Bruce Banner did not have any unnecessary reaction when he heard his words, and the two waited in silence. After a while, Natasha came over from a distance, glanced at Bruce Banner a little warily, and then said to Leon, "He won't have any more riots, right?" Quote. Leon shrugged, "I don't know, my character is to protect you and make sure that you and him can have normal contact. If he riots again, I will subdue him again, but unfortunately you have to live. If you live or die, I can kill him directly, then I will be much easier." Quote. "Hey, I'm listening, this joke isn't funny." Bruce Banner rode. Leon glanced at him and ignored him, and Natasha was also relieved at this time, but after hearing Leon's words, she gave him a blank look, and this look was naturally amorous. "Dr. Bruce Banner, I repeat once again, the Earth is going to suffer a terrible crisis. This crisis comes from space. We need your ability to help us locate the cosmic cube. This is 100,000 urgent things," Natasha said. Bruce Banner nodded and said, "I know, I will cooperate with you in the next period of time." Quote. "Okay, then we'll leave now," Natasha said over the communicator. "All surviving team members, report your location." Quote, for a long time there was no other sound on the communicator, and Leon and Natasha looked at each other, and then looked at Bruce Banner together. Bruce Banner shook his head and said, it's a pity that those members of your team were killed by the monster in my body just now. Quote, Leon didn't care. Natasha just frowned slightly, and then said, forget it, there will be another person to deal with these things, I will locate it first and let people come and pick us up. Quote, Natasha immediately began to contact. Leon and Bruce Banner did not make a sound, and then the three of them waited in place, until half an hour later, there was a buzzing sound in the sky, and several helicopters flew from far and near. The three got on a helicopter and returned to the airport base, and then took a special plane and returned to the United States in 10 hours. Natasha took the two to an underground S.H.I.E.L.D. base, where Leon met Nick Fury and Phil Coulson. One of them was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the other was a senior S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and coming here heralded the completion of Leon's mission. So he said directly, it seems that my task has been completed, then there will be nothing for me next, goodbye. Quote, saying that, he was about to leave, but at this time Nick Fury said, Mr. Stacy, I have a business to negotiate with you, worth $20 million. Quote, Leon was interested, so he said, tell me about it. Quote, Nick Fury said, cooperate with us. Cooperate with you? Leon asked. Yes, cooperate with us and do your best to protect New York, because next New York will become a battlefield, we will face an alien attack, this is just a contact war, if it is not handled well, it is likely to evolve into a global war, interstellar war. Nick Fury said. Leon knows the plot and is well aware of the situation that New York will face next. His home is in New York. In fact, even if Nick Fury does not say, he will use his own methods to protect his family and New York. But since Nick Fury has already said that there are still 20 million huge amounts in front of him, he naturally has no reason to object. So he nodded and said, yes, but it's still the same as the last transaction, I need to see the money first. Quote, making the arc reactor is a bottomless pit, and he also wants to develop Leon technology to a large extent, so money is essential. Yes, but you need to promise me one thing. Nick Fury said. What's going on? Leon asked. Be one of us. Nick Fury said. Sorry, I can't promise you this, I won't join any organization, what I need is freedom, I won't be held back by any organization. Leon refused very crisply. Just kidding, it's okay to help, it's okay to trade, but let him join S.H.I.E.L.D., that's impossible, at least he doesn't want to muddy the waters, a person is free, he can do whatever he wants, there's nothing cooler than that. Besides, his strength will increase day by day, and his ability will become stronger and stronger, so that he will not let an organization trap his growth. Before Nick Fury could say anything, he directly said, this matter is not negotiable, so if this is your necessary condition, then I can only refuse. Quote, Nick Fury seemed to have expected him to say this, so he said, well, you cannot mention this, but you need to be a supernumerary of S.H.I.E.L.D. Quote, what is a non-staff person? Leon asked. It is not affiliated with S.H.I.E.L.D., but maintains a cooperative relationship with S.H.I.E.L.D., and if necessary, we need to contribute to S.H.I.E.L.D., and we pay for it. Nick Fury said. Leon thought about it. S.H.I.E.L.D., as a huge intelligence and violent agency in the United States, is already entrenched in this country and has a huge power, and it is still necessary to have a good relationship with them. So he nodded and said, I can promise you this. Quote, the initiative is in him, and there is nothing to lose for him by agreeing to this. Okay, 20 million will hit your account soon, now I need you to cooperate with us and find someone first. Nick Fury said. Looking for whom? A man named Loki, the god of lies in Norse mythology. He has come to Earth, he is an extremely dangerous person, there is intelligence that the cosmic cube is in his hands, and he may use the cosmic cube to carry out a very dangerous big plan. Nick Fury said. Yes, with whom? Leon asked. Nick Fury glanced at Natasha. Natasha came to Leon and said, it's still the two of us together. Quote, Leon raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, I have no opinion. Quote, but before that, I need to go back. Leon said and looked at Nick Fury. Nick Fury nodded and said, you'd better start today, knowing we don't have much time. Quote, yes. Leon nodded, and then simply left. Nick Fury nodded to Natasha, and then Natasha followed. At this time Phil Coulson on the side said, Director, why give him so much commission? The previous 10 million had that playboy out. There is no loss for us, but 20 million, I don't think it's worth it. Quote. Nick Fury shook his head and said, believe me, this business will be worth it. Haven't you noticed that his ability has been increasing? Quote. What? Agent Coulson was puzzled. Nick Fury said, I looked at all the information about him and found an interesting thing. His ability seems to be increasing. Quote. He said to Phil Coulson. He originally had similar abilities to that little spider, and then in this operation, he was actually able to control metal, which is the signature ability of Magneto, the head of the Brotherhood, which is very interesting. His ability has been increasing, and no one knows what more abilities he will have next time. Quote. So to have a good relationship with him in advance, there will be no loss for us. As for money, the old man will approve it later. After all, without us, many things will not be as simple as they are now. We are essential, which is very important. Leon came out of the base and found that Natasha was still following behind, and couldn't help but turn around and ask, why are you following? Quote. Now that we are partners, I will naturally follow you wherever you go. Natasha said of course. Leon looked her up and down, then shook his head and said, not good. Quote. What's bad? Natasha wondered. I mean, you're not dressed well. Leon said. At this time, Natasha is still dressed up before, wearing a tight combat uniform, a dagger next to her calf, a gun on her waist, and a headset, which is not the dress that a normal person should have. Aren't you the same? Natasha gave him a blank look. Indeed, Leon is now also dressed in a special combat uniform. Leon shrugged. I'm going home, and I need to use this dress to tell my family that I have something to do next, and I forgot to tell you that I have never brought a woman home. Quote. Natasha smiled, stepped forward and took the initiative to hold Leon's hand. You mean, if I follow, is it a natural point to behave? Quote. No ideographic period. Leon quietly withdrew his arm and said, I want to tell you that if I want to bring a woman to my home, then I must have established a relationship with me, and you are obviously not among them. Quote. So, don't come with me, I'll come to you when I'm done. Leon waved at Natasha and walked out alone. Leon, you don't seem to know my contact information. Leon didn't reply. I have Coulson's contact information. Quote. Looking at Leon's departing back, Natasha had a smile on her face. No one knew the meaning of this smile. She remembered how Leon and Bruce Banner were fighting, and bit her lower lip slightly. On the other side, Leon found his car and drove home. It was after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He called George and Helen on the way, and asked them to go home early. When he got home, George and Helen were already waiting for him at home. Honey, you are. Helen covered her mouth in surprise when she saw him dressed as a special combat officer, while George also widened her eyes. I want to tell you one thing. I have cooperation with S.H.I.E.L.D. now, and the next thing I want to say is a confidential matter. I hope you will not be surprised after listening to it. Leon repeated Nick Fury's words, especially to George. New York will be dangerous next, and I want you to take Gwen to another city for a few days. Quote. George and Helen couldn't digest his words, and George shook his head and said, I am the police chief of New York. If what you said is true, then I should stay at this time. As for your Helen mother, I will let him take Gwen to other cities. Quote. Leon had long guessed that this would be the case, so he was not surprised. He knew that George would say this, because George was very responsible for his profession. Okay, Helen, you and Gwen go today. New York will be dangerous next. I will protect George. Leon said to Helen. Wait, you're just a normal student. Helen rode. I'm sorry I hid something from you. In fact, I have mastered the power that ordinary people don't have. Leon looked apologetic, and then his mind moved, and his hand was covered with a layer of pitch-black substance, and then changed into a long blade, and then his whole body was covered with black substance, turning into a blade mode. Ah! Helen covered her mouth and exclaimed, while George frowned. So, it was you who fought with that electric light man last time, right? Quote. Yes, I'm sorry, plus, the Spider-Man before me was also me. Leon said. Oh my God, how is this possible? Helen was shocked, while George was serious, and he said, I see, then you will face greater danger, right? Quote. Leon nodded and said, yes, I will protect myself. Quote. George is very honest, but his concern for Leon is very real. knowing that Leon has superpowers, the first thing he thinks about is his safety, which is completely from the perspective of a father. Just then, the doorbell rang. He walked over to the door and opened it, and then saw Natasha standing outside the door. "Hey little man, how is the communication with the family? Do you need my help?" Quote. Natasha returned address, this time wearing a floral skirt, a tight upper body, and a shawl on her shoulders, less pretty and more gentle. "No, I'm talking very well here." Leon said that the door was about to close, but Helen saw Natasha and said, "Is it a guest?" Quote. "No, it's a stranger." Leon pouted. "Little man, you make me sad." Natasha covered her mouth with her hands. This woman really knows how to make a scene. Leon's face was dark, and he found that he had underestimated the woman in front of him a little, not that he was not interested in this woman, but because he was not willing to have too much involvement with her before he figured out the true face and character of this woman. "Leon, if it's a guest, please invite her in quickly," George said. Leon knew that there was nothing he could do when he heard this, so he whispered to Natasha, "Don't talk nonsense for a while." Quote. Natasha gave him a blank look, bypassed him with a smile, greeted George and Helen. The two asked her to sit down. Helen brought a cup of black tea and asked, "Is there something wrong with this young lady coming over?" Quote. "I'm Leon's companion, and I'm worried that he hasn't explained something to you," Natasha said. George sat across from her and looked at her. "You're from S.H.I.E.L.D." Quote. As the commissioner of the New York City Police Department, he is still very clear about some intelligence agencies, knowing that S.H.I.E.L.D., an organization hidden in the shadows, can faintly understand that S.H.I.E.L.D. has some powers beyond ordinary people. "Yes, sir. So did Leon join you?" George asked again. Natasha glanced at Leon, and then said, "Our chief invited him, but unfortunately, he refused." Quote. George glanced at Leon, who nodded, meaning that she was right. Helen didn't know why, but at this time it was wise not to interject. Leon said, "Joining them is not the life I want. I can cooperate within my ability, but I can't work for them." Quote. George didn't say much, but Natasha said, "I believe Leon has communicated with you, and I am here mainly to answer some questions for you." Quote. George muttered slightly, "Where does the next danger come from?" Quote. Natasha pointed upwards. "Heavenly?" George asked. "No, to be precise, from the universe, aliens," Natasha said. "God, are there really aliens?" Helen was surprised. "Yes, aliens have actually existed all along." Natasha gave them popular science. Leon listened quietly on the side, and Helen suddenly said, "Aren't you and Leon boyfriend and girlfriend?" Quote. Leon shook his head and said, "I'm sorry to tell you, Mother Helen, what you expected didn't happen, and I'm not interested in him." Quote. "I'm interested in him, Ms. Helen," Natasha said. Leon was demolished by Natasha on the spot, and his face immediately turned black. "Ahem, that's all aside, Miss Natasha, I need you to assure me that Leon is safe, otherwise I'd rather he live in the country with her sister and Helen," George said. "I think you misunderstood, Mr. George. Leon's abilities are very powerful, beyond imagination. Remember that green-skinned monster that appeared in New York City 3 years ago?" Natasha said. "The Green Giant?" George asked. "Yes, his mission this time is to protect me, because I need to make contact with that monster, and he defeated that monster in the end, and even almost killed him," Natasha said. Oh God. Helen was shocked when she knew about it, and so did George, and the two were surprised, never expecting Leon to have such great power and ability. So he has enough self-preservation ability, and the dangers he will encounter next are related to each of us. As long as they are in it, they cannot guarantee their own safety, which I hope you can prepare in advance," Natasha said. Leon nodded, agreeing with her words. George and Helen then showed a lot calmer, having accepted the reality that Leon was going out, and George also made arrangements for Helen to take Gwen to her grandmother's house in the country to live temporarily. After communicating with the family here, Leon planned to leave with Natasha, and after saying goodbye, Natasha suddenly said to him, "How am my performance?" Quote. "Not bad," Leon said indifferently. Natasha gave him a blank look, stepped forward and took his arm. "Then are you interested in me?" Quote. Leon stopped, turned his head to look at Natasha's beautiful face, and said after a moment, "What are you so attached to me for?" Quote. "Because you make me feel novel. I know that you must be a capable man, and in general, such a man will be very attractive in this situation. Natasha said. Yes, too, meaning you are attracted to me? Leon asked. Who knows? Natasha laughed. Leon suddenly stopped her delicate waist with his hand and said, then how about we have a friendship cannon? Quote. Cluck. Natasha let go of his arm and smiled, why do you think that? Quote. Who let you seduce me all the time? Do I have one? Leon was a little unsure of what Natasha meant, so he smiled at her, and then walked away. Natasha saw that he did not continue to talk, a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes, and she smiled slightly when she looked at Leon's back, and at this time she felt more and more interesting about Leon. This time Leon did not drive, but got into Natasha's sports car and rushed all the way to the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D., where Leon met Captain America, a blonde and blue-eyed, handsome-looking young man, tall and burly, full of muscles and a very decent look. In addition, Tony Stark was also here, and when he saw Leon, he opened his hand to step forward to hug, but Leon then put his hand against his chest and said, don't be so enthusiastic, I'm not used to it. Quote. Hey, man, you earned me $10 million, and then we'll be comrades in arms, shouldn't we be warmer? Tony Stark had a hurt look. Leon glanced at him expressionlessly, not bothering to pay attention to him. The Captain of the United States stretched out his hand to him and said, I'm Steve Rogers. Quote. Leon Stacy. Leon shook hands with him, not showing much surprise. How's it going? Natasha asked. Captain America said. Director Nick is already on the spaceship, Thor and Dr. Bruce Banner are there, looking for the cosmic cube, Loki is imprisoned in it, and nothing else is easy to say. Quote. Let's go, Natasha said. Except for Leon, the faces of several others became serious, and then the group took off on a Coon fighter and quickly flew towards a specific location. Leon estimated that he was going to fly to the space carrier, and the result was indeed flying to the space aircraft carrier as he expected, which was extremely huge, completely a modified conventional aircraft carrier, and flew abruptly powered by 4 huge turbofans. The fighter plane landed on it, and Leon and his party went to the main control room of the bridge, where they met Nick Fury, along with others. For example, Thor, a blonde man with shawl and blonde hair, full of burly, wearing a red cape and armor, looks very rugged, carrying his trademark hammer, and dressed as a berserker. He didn't say much after seeing the people coming, it seems that he has not yet integrated into the environment here, he escorted Loki here, and they are temporarily in a cooperative position. Bruce Banner is looking for the energy signal source of the cosmic cube through high-tech means at this time, and everything seems to be going on in an orderly manner. Why isn't Hawkeye here? Natasha asked. We lost contact with him and we don't know the situation for the time being. Agent Coulson said. Did Loki do anything out of the ordinary? Not yet. So, we should be able to relax a little bit now. It was Tony Stark who spoke, as always, out of tune. The chief said that you can rest for the time being, and it is better to recharge your strength, because there is a high probability that there will be a tough battle next. Phil Coulson said. Leon understood some basic information, and then his brows furrowed, because he could now conclude that the first step of the Avengers plot was about to happen, which gave him a slight sense of urgency. Without making small talk with a few people, he said to Coulson, take me to the place of rest. Quote. Okay, follow me. Tony Stark saw that he was leaving, so he shouted, hey man, it's a rare pre-war break, shouldn't you relax? Quote. How to relax? Is there wine on this? Are there women? Can you smoke a puff, girl? Can't be right. Quote. Leon shrugged. Natasha rolled her eyes in a word, and said angrily, little man, I'm still here, am I not a woman? Quote. Then do you want to be soaked by me? Leon said directly. Oh my god, you two have only developed to this extent in such a short time. Tony Stark looked surprised. Leon waved at him, didn't look at Natasha, followed Coulson and left. He still has 2 projection opportunities in the system that are useless. Instead of messing around with them here, it is better to project early and increase his ability is true. He was arranged in a small single room. The conditions were very average, just a bed, nothing else. In the empty sky is also this condition. He did not bother to complain, directly closed clothes on the bed, and then called out the system. Projecting Scott Summers. Drip. projection. Scott Summers succeeded, consumes 175 good points, and the host has 30 seconds to prepare. The name Scott Summers may feel unfamiliar, but if you talk about laser eyes, it must be extremely familiar. What Leon wants to project is the laser eye in the Mutant Academy, that is, the eye can emit red light, the whole humanoid laser battery. Leon vaguely remembers the description of Scott Summers in the original Marvel book, who can emit a red shockwave with heat from his eyes, and its energy is continuous and even can supply the Phoenix to heat. As for the Phoenix, it is Marvel's bug-level divine power, and the laser energy emitted by Scott Summers' eyes can be swallowed by the Phoenix, and in terms of quantity, the energy of the laser eye is almost endless. As for the source of these energies, the explanation in the original work is that his eyes are connected to a different space. This space does not exist in traditional physics, some are only energy, pure energy. This space is full of a photon-like particle. After moving to real space, it has kinetic energy, that is, forming a red beam. The laser eye is not as exaggerated as the power of the Phoenix, but the simple attack power is extremely strong, and the energy is almost inexhaustible, and it can also become a small bug-level ability. And Leon fancy the eyes of the laser eye, as well as the alien space energy behind the eyes. Now Leon is already a strong man on the Earth, but the first thing that troubles him is energy. The more abilities he obtains, the higher the requirements for his own energy. There is no strong energy as a foundation. No matter how many abilities he has, it is just a fortress cast on the sand, and it may collapse at any time. 30 seconds passed quickly, and Leon quickly entered the projection space, which was full of towering buildings and dense streets. This time the projection space was still a metropolis, but a city he had never seen before. He walked slowly through the street, quietly waiting for the enemy to come to the door, while also thinking about what to do next. This terrain is very favorable to him, and Scott Summers' attack method is very direct, that is, to attack targets within his line of sight, that is, all people and targets he can see can be attacked by him, and his attack range depends on the clarity of his line of sight. If it is in an open area, Leon will definitely become a living target for laser eyes, but in the city, there are more places to hide. He wandered the streets, everything around him seemed very real, and he even took a pack of cigarettes in a shop on the street, lit a puff, and had the same sensory experience as in the outside world, which made him think that maybe the projection space itself was a real world. It's just that he has no way to prove this conjecture. This time the waiting time was a little long. He finished a cigarette. Scott Summers did not appear, but he did not let his guard down, but changed into a blade form early and waited quietly. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, half an hour passed, and he wondered, for Mao's projection this time, will it come so slowly? Suddenly, he had alarm bells in his heart, and he didn't want to avoid it, but it was still a moment late. There was a sharp pain in the shoulder, mixed with a burning pain, and a fiery red light could be seen in the afterlight, which penetrated the shoulder. Leon rolled on the spot, turned his head, and saw a figure appear on the street corner, wearing a pale silver combat uniform, with glasses cut like a whole mirror, and a fiery red laser beam burst out from the glasses. In his original location, the street has been pierced through a hole, and there is a sharp high-frequency sound in his ears, which is very harsh. Looking at his shoulder again, it was almost split in two with his body, which was originally a hole, but because he himself avoided moving, the laser beam cut half of his shoulder along the wound. Good risk. With his current physique, he couldn't even block a laser blow, and if he was dodging slowly just now, it would definitely penetrate his head. Spider sensing told him that Scott Summers was about to turn his head and gaze, and Leon stretched out his entire arm, grabbed a telephone pole in the distance, and pulled him sharply. The next moment he left, the laser light spread to the position he had just been. This kind of long-range attack is really a bit of a headache. Leon dodged again, and then with a wave of his hand, the metal within a radius of 100 meters around the area began to break away from the building, suddenly bringing up a large amount of smoke, and a large piece of metal fell towards Scott Summers like raindrops. I thought that this blow would also cause some damage, but what happened in the next moment made Leon's eyes widen. I saw that your laser light, which was only the thickness of your finger, suddenly stopped, and then the next moment, Scott Summers raised his head, pressed his finger on the temple, and from his glasses came a tsunami-like pillar of light, as if it was a volcanic eruption, directly vaporizing a lot of oncoming metal. Boom! After the explosion like muffled thunder, it was a series of chain reactions. The wind was fierce, the high-frequency sounds gathered together, like thunder, and the clouds above the sky were directly pierced through a huge hole at this time. Gee, no wonder it's the leader who assists the entire mutant in the middle and late stages. Scott Summers is really strong. The intensity of the pure energy burst is comparable to the energy generated by the asteroid impact, and the destructive power is absolutely terrifying. Leon never underestimates any Marvel hero, because this is a real world, not like the performance of the weakened personal power in the movie. In this heyday, Scott Summers shows more combat power than Magneto. Of course, it is only a one-sided destructive force. If Scott Summers is really pitted against Magneto, then Magneto has a good chance of winning. Without him, if Magneto really explodes with all his strength, it can affect and change the movement of a planet, and in this point alone, Scott Summers is not comparable to Magneto. Leon had already made up his mind to hide from Scott Summers at this time, so he would not appear in front of him again. He hid behind a wall. Spider sensing told him every move of the laser eye over there, and through the subtle sound, he could also distinguish the next move. With another wave of his hand, a large piece of metal soared into the sky, and then quickly split, changing into thin blades one after another, and striking at Scott Summers below in a spiral trajectory. And Scott Summers' reaction was very direct, looking up at the incoming metal, seeing that the laser light thinned, and then swept from left to right, and where it passed, the metal vaporized again. Oh, it's a bit difficult. Leon scratched his head a little. After 2 trials, he could see clearly. This guy was completely like a hedgehog. It was difficult to get close, and the long-range means were not necessarily fought for a while. There is no way. I can only break 10,000 laws with one force. Leon opened his hands, and the perception of magnetic control spread out along the city buildings. 10 meters, 50 meters, 70 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, 500 meters, it didn't stop until about 3 kilometers, which encompassed almost the entire city. In his perception, every metal was under his magnetic control induction. He activated the ability, and suddenly the entire city, all the metals under his magnetic control perception, all trembled. From a distance, the tall buildings began to shake. The metal on them began to fall off and separate from the building. The ground shook endlessly, like an earthquake, and slowly the amplitude became more and more intense, and it seemed that the whole city was shaking violently. Leon raised his hands upward, and with his movements, an invisible fluctuation pulled all the metals controlled by him, and all of those metals rose into the air, and then gradually converged to form a huge metal ball. At this moment, the entire city seemed to have suffered a doomsday disaster. Countless buildings collapsed, streets cracked and broken, and metal pipes under the ground broke out one by one, rising into the sky along with those metals. The metal balls gradually gathered and grew, becoming thicker little by little, and the smoke and dust spread out in the sky, shrouding the entire city in it. The city has been destroyed. Most of it has been destroyed by Leon's terrifying means, which is simply a godlike power. Leon's hands did not move, but the physical pressure was extremely huge, not physical, but mental, and he felt that his energy was rapidly draining, disappearing from his body little by little. He can last in such a state for a while, but the consumption of energy is also amazing. If I have energy replenishment at this time, then I can continue forever. Leon's spider induction has been paying attention to Scott Summers, and he has no intention of fighting back for such a long time, except for dodging things that fall from the sky, which makes Leon more and more sure that the characters in the projection space have no intelligence. Fortunately, if there is wisdom, it must be more difficult. At this time, Leon pressed down sharply with both hands, and the metal ball with a diameter of hundreds of meters fell down like an asteroid. The air was shaking, and a sound whistling was produced at low altitude, and the vibration caused by friction of the air was disgusting. The impact is in the next instant. Leon called this trick, earthburst stars. Boom! The vibration generated by the air friction was like rolling thunder, and at this time, the entire projection space seemed to be vibrating. Even if Leon faced such a situation, the blade skin on his body was squirming and trembling like water. This is still because the metal ball has no initial kinetic energy, but it falls with gravity like this, and if it is a real meteor falling, then just the hanging wind and roar can seriously injure Leon. If he is at the center point, he may even be directly vaporized, which is the horror of meteors. But now this metal ball has no such effect, because after all, it is free fall, and the method used by Leon is very simple, that is, smash. Some metal can't kill Scott Summers, then more, if more can't, then press it all. Leon needs Scott Summers' abilities, which is important. Scott Summers began to escape, facing such a blow like an extinction, even he could not cope with it. If he was smashed, it would definitely become meat sludge. As he fled, he fiddled with the regulator of the spectacle frame at his temple, and then turned his head sharply, and a blazing light burst out from the glasses, extremely thick, and the diameter was 30 or 40 meters at the thickest point. Boom! The laser light and the metal ball collided, and where the two touched, a large piece of metal was vaporized, creating a huge hole, and in the hole, because of the amazing high temperature, the metal directly turned into iron juice. Under Leon's magnetic control perception, he could clearly perceive that the metal ball was almost penetrated under this blow. Awesome! If this product condenses the laser light energy, it may be able to penetrate a planet under the full burst. Quote. The more he experienced the power of laser light, the more he was attracted to this ability. Boom! The sound of a violent sonic boom came out. Leon felt deafening. A strong wind blew down, scattering a large area of smoke, and then the wind rolled upside down. Scott Summers could not fix his figure under this fierce wind, was swept up by the wind, and fell in the distance. Give me death. Leon pressed down sharply with both hands, and the metal ball that was already falling suddenly increased in speed at this moment, and fell downward with unparalleled momentum. Scott Summers could not escape, and although the counterattack just now was terrible, it also deprived him of his last chance to escape. Boom! An indescribable vibration came. Leon had already begun to flee at full speed before the metal ball fell. He was indeed powerful, and his body defense in the blade state was amazing, but in the face of such a monstrous power, he also had to flash people, even if this thing was made by him. Finally, when he escaped almost 100 meters, the metal ball collided with the ground. Boom! The huge vibration and terrifying sonic boom made him have the illusion of hearing in both ears at this moment, and then he felt the huge wave-like wind behind him, rolling him directly forward and flying out quickly. His whole body was uncontrollable in midair, and heaven and earth were shaking in his eyes, and this collision was too terrifying, making him feel terrified. Leon glanced back and saw where the metal ball fell. The bottom surged like a horizontal plane, the earth rose and fell, and the impact lines spread around, destroying everything in its path. The violent air flow blew some huge buildings into the sky, and more were indeed directly annihilated in that collision. It's terrible. With this thought, Leon fell directly out of 100 meters, smashed on the street in the distance, and with a boom, suddenly smashed the ground out of a huge hole. Ahem! Leon spewed out a mouthful of blood, and this impact broke all over his body, and he suddenly became a seriously injured person. Fortunately, he has the recovery ability of a saber-toothed tiger, and his recovery power is amazing in the state of the blade, and when the two are combined, these injuries recover in a matter of seconds. Everything is not over. The wind and shaking continue. Everything in front of you has turned to ash. The entire city has been destroyed in this huge collision, and the place is completely in ruins. By the time it was all over, it was already 5 or 6 minutes later, and Leon was sure that Scott Summers was dead, because he couldn't have survived the very center of the collision, which was unrealistic. Leon quickly flew towards the impact site, and then controlled a large expanse of metal to fly away from it, and he went deep into the crater with the metal detachment. He is going to lick the box. He is going to take the loot that belongs to him. A few minutes later, he finally saw the box, and Scott Summers' body had long since disappeared. Leon couldn't wait to open the box. There was only one compartment in the box, and several cards were stored in the compartment. Drip. Congratulations to the host for defeating Scott Summers and obtaining the laser eye ability fragment controllable *6. Leon returned to his normal form, raised his eyebrows slightly, took the card out of the box, and then the box disappeared, and the grid inside was automatically transferred to the system light curtain. The next moment, he withdrew from the projection space, and when he opened his eyes, he was already on the bed of the space carrier. 6 ability fragment cards. The harvest is decent, that is, how many meanings are controllable? Leon thought about it. The ability of laser eye Scott Summers in the original book is not freely controlled, unless he closes his eyes, otherwise, his eyes will always emit laser light, so he has to bring a special glasses to adjust the intensity of the laser light. Then this controllable, does it mean that this ability you have obtained can be controlled as you like? When Leon thought about it, he immediately became excited again. Taking a deep breath, he didn't think too much about it, and slapped an ability card on himself. Suddenly, a hot current emerged, and the same feeling as before, which was a manifestation of increased ability, and the heat flow poured into the limbs and bones, acting on all corners of the body. This feeling quickly subsided, and then Leon noticed that there was something unusual in his eyes, and his vision was further enhanced, although the improvement was very slight, but he could still detect it. Moreover, when he condensed his gaze, he felt that his eyes were hot, as if he was about to shed tears, but it was different from the feeling of tears. He looked at a mirror on the side, and immediately saw that his eyes were emitting a faint red light, especially at the pupil position. Red light gathered, as if it was about to burst out of the eyes. Sure enough, this ability is controllable. Leon quickly relaxed, and then the red light in his eyes disappeared. He then spent a few minutes patting all 5 cards on his body to be satisfied, and then called up the system light curtain, and then saw the data change on it. Host: Leon. Abilities: 113% Spiderman, 37% Saber-Toothed Tiger, Alien Symbiote Growing, 121% Magneto, 31% Scott Summers. Ability: Number of projections: 1. You can project twice a day. Closing parenthesis. Good value: 915. Kill: 247. It looks like Scott Summers will have to project 3 more times to increase his laser ability to 100%. Leon also has a projection opportunity today, and this opportunity naturally did not let go. It just happens to be used to project saber-toothed tigers, and his recovery ability has not been enhanced for some time. Leon does what he thinks. Projection saber-toothed tiger. Drip: the projection saber-toothed tiger is successful. The killing value is 55 points, and the host has 30 seconds to prepare. A moment later, he entered the projection space again. This time it was a forest, with a radius of only about 1 square kilometer, similar to the place where the projection saber-toothed tiger appeared before. And he also saw the saber-toothed tiger for the first time. He came out from behind a tree, showed his claws and pounced on Leon. Leon didn't even change his blade form, and directly kicked him in the chest, kicking him directly out dozens of meters away, smashing several trees fiercely, and smashing on the ground for half a day before recovering. It's not that the saber-toothed tiger is too weak, but that after such a time of projection, his ability has grown immeasurably, and in terms of strength alone, he has already surpassed the saber-toothed tiger too much, and the reaction speed is too much, and the saber-toothed tiger is too much. Try a new ability. Leon saw that the saber-toothed tiger got up and rushed towards him again. His eyes focused on his body, his gaze condensed, and then he felt that his eyes were hot, and the picture he saw in front of him was covered with a layer of red. Then, a crimson laser beam burst out from his eyes, and he could clearly feel the energy passing, but that energy did not come from himself, but from an unexplored place, and he had no idea where it came from. The 2 beams of light were each arms thick, and they had already hit the chest of the saber-toothed tiger in an instant, and the flesh and blood of the saber-toothed tiger did not have the slightest ability to resist, and it was pierced in this instant. Increase the power. Leon's heart moved, his brows furrowed, and the laser beam in his eyes suddenly thickened several times, enough to be the thickness of a bucket, exuding a high-frequency screaming sound. He looked at the head of the saber-toothed tiger. Under the bombardment of this terrifying energy beam, the head of the saber-toothed tiger only lasted less than a minute before being vaporized. Saber-toothed tiger is an older villain in the Marvel world. Its ability is needless to say, a super recovery ability. I don't know how many mutants to consume to death. In close combat, his fighting skills are forged after countless fierce fights. Even if he is not capable, just by virtue of his fighting skills, he is also the most top limit of the human race. But such a veteran villain, under Leon's laser light, did not even have the slightest resistance force, and directly vaporized his head and most of his body. This is very telling, enough to show that the real combat power of the laser eye Scott Summers is not at all as unbearable as shown in the movie, and this almost misunderstood energy source gives him an innate advantage against the enemy. With sufficient visual distance, it is not impossible for him in the long-distance consumption of Magneto. Therefore, Leon concluded that in this world, no character can be underestimated, because they will never be as unbearable as they are in the movie, and some abilities may not even be able to win steadily even now. Fortunately, he does not have the idea of dominating the world in one breath now, and obscene development has always been the most stable. The saber-toothed tiger's corpse fell, and Leon went up to open the box, and inside were 3 grids, the same thing that burst out of the first defeat of the saber-toothed tiger. Drip. Congratulations to the host for defeating the saber-toothed tiger in full state, obtaining the saber-toothed tiger self-healing ability fragment 6, the saber-toothed tiger super endurance fragment 4, and the saber-toothed tiger claw fragment 6. Leon didn't have much surprise, took out all the cards, and then he was kicked out of the projection space. After using all the cards in about 10 minutes, he had nothing to do for the time being, and when he had nothing to do, he closed his eyes and rested, and soon fell asleep. When he woke up again, looking at the time, 2 or 3 hours had passed, and he did not wake up naturally but was awakened by a strong explosion. The next moment, he clearly felt the ground under his feet begin to tilt to one side, or the entire room. What's going on? Was the space carrier attacked? Quote. In the blink of an eye, Leon remembered that there was such a thing in the original plot. It seemed that the turbofan engine of the aerospace aircraft carrier was blown up. He directly stabilized his figure and went out. At this time the entire aerospace aircraft carrier was already in chaos. Many people took up weapons and gathered towards the deck. At this time it was still afternoon. Leon quickly ran towards the direction of the bridge, and suddenly heard a muffled roar on the way. It's the voice of the Hulk. Leon turned and ran towards the source, and the sound of fighting was already heard in front of him, mixed with the roar of the Hulk, the snort of Thor, and Natasha's panicked breathing. Turning a corner, he came to the hangar, which had been wreaked havoc, and saw that the Hulk was fighting with Thor at this time, and the 2 sides were coming and going, like 2 monsters fighting, destroying the hangar. The hammer in Thor's hand is very strong, and every blow can smash the Hulk dizzy, and the Hulk roars even more angrily because of anger, and his body is filled with an amazing sense of strength, and every punch can smash the alloy ground under his feet and collapse a piece. Leon turned his head and saw Natasha shrinking in a far corner, her pretty face already oozing fine sweat, and at this time she was holding a gun to guard the Hulk. Obviously the Hulk left a lot of psychological shadows on this woman. Roar! The Hulk punched Thor away, and Thor flew out like a cannonball, and the place where it landed was exactly in the direction where Leon was, which was also coincidental enough. Leon didn't think much. At this time he also had strength, directly transformed into blade mode. One hand opened, pitch black liquid gushed out, spread out on the palm, formed a broad shield. Thor directly smashed on the broad shield in the next moment. Leon's body only swayed slightly, and Thor fell to the ground with a snort of pain, covering his chest and getting up. Who are you? Thor wiped the blood stain from the corner of his mouth and asked Leon. I'm Leon, Leon said in a low voice. This guy is really tough. Thor gritted his teeth. Leave it to me, you go see Loki, I'm afraid the guy will run. Leon said. No need to look, he has already escaped. Thor said indignantly. That guy is a criminal now, if I catch him, I will kill him directly. Leon said. He wondered how much kill value he would get if he killed Loki. Listen, he is from Asgard, and he is still my brother, and what to do with him should be up to me. Thor frowned. But after he came to Earth, he should have killed dozens of people, right? Leon sneered. Oh, he's adopted. Thor shrugged. Maybe this is humor. Anyway, Leon is calm, his face in the state of the blade, there is no other expression except fierceness and terror. Then it's settled. Leon doesn't have any idea of following the direction of the plot. He is already a member of this world, and he still clings to the plot, which is basically a brain-dead move. What is the plot? That is, some things that are bound to happen, can be attributed to the limitations of the cosmic timeline, so that some things will happen within a fixed point in time, but because of the instigation of Leon's butterfly wings, from the moment he first shot with the ability, the future itself is already full of various uncertainties. Leon didn't think too much, because the Hulk had already rushed towards Thor at this time, and he was standing behind Thor, and naturally he was also included in the target of the Hulk. The Hulk threw a punch, with a fierce wind, the whistling sound vibrate, and in an instant it had already hit Thor. Thor is an Asgard god race, or the prince of the royal family in the god race, full of divine blood. In terms of physique is not comparable to the Earthlings, even if he does not have a hammer, just with a strong physique, he can face the Hulk. So in the face of the Hulk's terrifying punch, he did not retreat, stretched out his arm to block the blow, banged, Thor's body tilted slightly, and then stood up and punched back at the Hulk's huge head. The two are like two berserkers. There are no extra fancy moves, just like that, you punch me and I punch back. The Hulk has a huge body. You don't need to guess to know the terrifying power contained in his body, and Thor is the same size as the Earthlings, although it is stronger, but it is not beyond the standard of normal people. It is difficult to imagine that his body actually contains such a powerful power, and can fight back and forth with the Hulk. Roar. The Hulk roared again and again. His anger became stronger and stronger, and Thor faced the Hulk in such a state, and as time went by, he resisted more and more difficultly. Hurry up and help. After a long while, Thor also lost the pride of the Asgard god race and had to ask Leon for help. Leon's mouth split, a sinister smile appeared on Blade's face, and he said in a hoarse voice, "Hulk, get me back." Quote. Nope. The Hulk won't kill you guys. Quote. Hulk suddenly roared out a sentence at this time. His sanity has almost lost. The personality that belongs to Bruce Banner has been fully suppressed by Hulk. In this state, he may not know what fear is. Boom. There was another muffled sound, and Thor was directly blasted out by Hulk's punch, and the next moment, Hulk rushed towards Leon. Be careful. There was a sudden exclamation in the distance. It was Natasha, and her face was full of worry at this time. Leon grinned. It seems that you are completely healed and forgot the pain, and I will remind you of the fear that I only deserve. Quote. Saying that, he waved his hand, and the broken fighters and metal creations around him all flew over, extremely fast, directly deformed on the way, and then fixed Hulk's limbs. 4 thick metal rings suddenly imprisoned Hulk's hands and feet, hanging him in the air. The Hulk struggled, and the huge strength caused the 4 rings to crack, but the crack recovered in the next moment, so let him struggle, and he could not get out of such a shackle in a short time, unless his strength could be doubled in a short time, but that obviously took some time. As soon as Leon stepped on it, the metal ground cracked, and his right hand instantly expanded, swelling like a giant hammer, which was slammed up by him and smashed directly towards Hulk's chest. Boom. With a muffled sound, the 4 metal rings shattered directly, and the Hulk also flew out upside down, like a shooting star, and the next moment it smashed on a thick metal block. This metal block is 3 meters long and wide, and the thickness is an astonishing 2 meters, controlled by Leon, although it was cracked by the Hulk, but in the end there is no age crack. Then the metal block was like a liquid, wrapping Hulk's entire body and fixing his limbs, which was much stronger than Fankei's ring. Leon jumped in front of him, leaned forward slightly, stepped on Hulk's chest with one foot, and pulled Hulk's head with the other hand, and came face to face with him. Now, have you ever recalled anything? His scarlet tongue dragged over Hulk's face, and his mouth was full of sharp teeth. Roar. He was answered by a roar from the Hulk. Bang. With a muffled sound, the entire hangar trembled, and Leon smashed a punch into the Hulk's face. You have to learn to be polite. Half of Hulk's face was smashed and collapsed, and it recovered in just 2 seconds, and then he turned his head sharply to look at Leon, and some kind of anger seemed to be substantive. Leon did break his head close to himself, and then one of his hands turned into claws and doubled in size, each nail like a blade, grabbing Hulk's shoulder and digging 5 fingers into it. I see anger in your eyes. To be honest, I don't like people looking at me like this. If it weren't for me taking this business, then you would definitely die at my hands today. Now do you want to taste this taste in advance? Saying that, Leon's claws tightened, and he grabbed half of Hulk's shoulder into minced meat. Roar. The sharp pain made the Hulk even more crazy. He struggled strongly, his chest rose and fell with heavy breathing, and under his struggle, the metal ball cage also produced cracks, but every time at this time, the cracks would disappear in the next moment. Yes, that's it. The more you struggle, the more pain I will make you try. Don't worry, I have a set of processes waiting for you next. Leon said in a hoarse voice. Thor withdrew the hammer, and when he heard his words, his body couldn't help but tremble, and there was a kind of chill. Man, according to our Asgardian rules, it is immoral to abuse a prisoner, and he is also considered our temporary companion. You should let him go. Leon turned his head and said indifferently, I like to see the enemy like this. If you don't want him to be tortured, then how about you replace him? Quote. Thor turned his head and pretended not to hear, and made up his mind that he would never be an enemy of Leon when it was absolutely unnecessary, because this guy was too cruel. Leon didn't bother to care about his mental activity, and was about to use his claws to unload Hulk's arm. Natasha walked over quickly and said, Stop, we still need him, he is also one of our main combat forces. Quote. Leon glanced at her. This glance made her subconsciously take a step back. Her sixth sense was very keen, and she had already found that Leon was more terrifying than the Hulk, and this horror was not only on the outside, but also on the inside. If Hulk represents the power of anger, then Leon gives her the feeling of cruelty and violence, which is a state of mind that defies everything, as if the rules of the world cannot bind him at all. Boring. Leon sighed. Then he turned his head and looked directly at Hulk. Red light oozed from the position of his eyes. The red light was not very bright. He controlled the energy output, and 2 laser beams burst out of his eyes, directly hitting Hulk's brain. The 2 laser rays were each fist thick, and as soon as they made contact with Hulk's skin, blue smoke came out of the contact point, and the flesh was quickly burned, and then the laser light was burning his skull. Roar! The Hulk roared in pain and struggled, but his head was not held by Leon's hands, making it difficult for him to struggle to break free, and he could only let the laser light burn his head. Does it hurt? I have lowered my energy output now. If I condense the energy, I can easily penetrate your head. I am curious, if your head is pierced, then can you survive? Quote. The Hulk was still roaring, but when he heard Leon's words, his body froze irrepressibly. Now, go back, or I'll kill you. Leon's voice was extremely cold, and the laser in his eyes stopped. Hulk looked at Leon angrily. The wound on the brain door was quickly repaired. After a short silence, Hulk's body gradually relaxed, took a deep look at Leon, and then his body began to shrink. The green of the body surface gradually faded, and after a while it returned to Bruce Banner. All in all, the Hulk prodded. Bruce Banner gasped and sweated. Man, are you really trying to kill me? Quote. No, I'm not interested in killing you, I just want to know if the guy in your body will die. Leon also returned to normal, and then waved his hand to disperse the metal restraint on Bruce Banner, who got out of it, and fell limply to the ground as if he had lost his strength. Leon didn't bother with him anymore, looked around, and said, can anyone tell me now what happened on this ship? Quote. Loki fled. Thor frowned. Leon rolled his eyes. Needless to say, he could guess, and what? Quote. Natasha said, it was Hawkeye who led the attack here, and Tony and the captain went to repair the damaged engine. Quote. And then what? What are we going to do next? It was Thor who asked. Leon wanted to ignore him, but still said, what else can be done? Find the enemy, and then destroy it. Do you still want to save it for Christmas? Well, I think your proposal is feasible. Thor nodded, and suddenly said, by the way, you can call me Thor, my friends call me that. Quote. It seems that Leon's terrifying power has been recognized by him. Leon nodded without saying anything, and Natasha said, let's get out of here first. Quote. A few people did not stop much, and after leaving the hangar, the panic outside had calmed down. There were groups of combatants rushing out, the deck had been emptied, and most of the incoming enemies had been killed. Halfway they met Hawkeye, and when Leon was about to make a move, Natasha suddenly said, don't kill him, he is controlled by Loki. Quote. As you wish. Leon has little interest in killing people like Hawkeye, although killing will increase his killing value, but at least now he has to take care of the face of S.H.I.E.L.D. After all, Hawkeye is also their person, and it is not good to kill after the fact. Natasha glanced at Leon gratefully, then took a deep breath and stepped forward, coming face to face with Hawkeye, who was ready to defeat Hawkeye with her own power. Why do you need to be so troublesome? Leon glanced at Hawkeye, and as soon as his mind moved, the metal ground under Hawkeye's feet suddenly turned into liquid, wrapping his feet around, and then a cloud of metal liquid wrapped around his hands, directly binding his hands behind his back. Look, how simple, it's done. Hawkeye fell directly to the ground. His strength and reaction ability are just the limits of ordinary people, except for shooting arrows quickly and steadily. There is nothing else that can enter Leon's eyes, and it is easy to clean him up. Ah, Natasha somehow faced Leon with a sense of frustration in her heart. He handed it over to you. Leon said, and Thor both went directly to the bridge, saw Nick Fury here. At this time Nick Fury, like a volcano about to erupt, forced to endure anger, after seeing Leon and Thor, looked directly at Thor and said, your brother just killed my brother, Agent Phil Coulson died, it was Loki who did it. Quote. Thor looked serious, embarrassed in his heart, and opened his mouth for a while not knowing what to say. Fortunately, Nick Fury is not accountable, So after a long sigh of relief, he said, "The cosmic cube has been found. The current location is in New York, and the news from Tony's side is very bad. He had direct contact with Loki and was thrown from his house by Loki." Quote, "Loki is using the energy of the cosmic cube to open a space-time passage to pull his alien army over. The captain has already dealt with it, but unfortunately the device can't be stopped now." He stared at Leon and Thor for a moment before saying seriously, "Next, I need you to do your best to stop Loki. The safety of tens of millions of people in New York, for the time being, only we will guarantee it, because it will take more than an hour for the National Guard to enter New York City." Quote, Leon nodded and didn't say much. He was entrusted with loyalty, and his credit was good in this regard. Thor's face became more serious, and he said in a deep voice, "I will catch Loki, and I will solve this disaster with my own hands." Quote, "Then, the safety of New York, please you for the time being," Nick Fury said. "And us." At this time, a voice came, and it was Hawkeye and Natasha. Hawkeye has now regained his senses, and he doesn't know what method Natasha used. At this time his face is full of anger. He has been controlled by people, and he has done so many evil things, which makes him, who has always considered himself a hero, unacceptable in any way. "Okay, you guys go now, we don't have any extra time," Nick Fury said. "Good," Natasha answered, and then the five went to Class A, riding on a Coon fighter. Bruce Banner sat next to Leon, taking advantage of the fighter's start and muttered, "Dude, you just hurt Hulk, he has some emotions now, I may not be able to help in a while." Quote, Leon glanced at him and said, "Let him come out in a moment, if he doesn't come out, then never come out." Quote, I'll tell him that." Quote, Bruce Banner didn't know why. When he faced Leon, his heart trembled, perhaps out of fear. After all, he faced Leon twice, and both times he was abused by Leon and couldn't find the North. Even if Hulk's recognition was fierce and angry, in front of Leon he was still like a child, suppressed by death. The fighter took off, landed from the space carrier, and quickly flew towards New York, and now time was pressing, and everyone except Leon was nervous. Now in New York, the surface is calm and normal, but in the dark there are torrents, and no one knows how strong the dark waves hidden under the calm will be. The group soon arrived in New York City on a fighter, and Natasha's face suddenly changed. The radar received a special signal. The energy source is extremely strong, and it is very stable, which should be the location of the cosmic Rubik's Cube. Quote, "Hurry up," Bruce Banner said a little eagerly. The fighter turned in midair, and a moment later came to the top of a tall building, from which a strange machine was placed on the roof, shrouded in a light blue light curtain, and there was also a beam of light shooting into the sky in this instrument, obviously carrying out some kind of energy transmission. "It's not good. They are about to open the space channel, we have to hurry," Natasha said eagerly. The rest of the people didn't look very good, and they all sensed the seriousness of the matter. "I'll go down first." Thor jumped off the fighter first, landed next to the instrument, picked up the hammer in his hand, and smashed it fiercely. Buzz. The hammer did not smash on the instrument as expected, but was blocked by the light blue light curtain, and the electric light overflowed in an instant, crackling non-stop. Thor only felt a huge force acting on his body, and then he fell violently from the tall building like a cannonball. "There is an energy shield outside that thing. It should be the energy exuded by the cosmic Rubik's Cube. The energy of the cosmic Rubik's Cube is infinite. As long as the machine is not shut down, we can't break this shield." Bruce Banner saw the key at a glance, and his face suddenly became very ugly. "What do we do now?" Natasha asked. "Let's strike together first and see if we can break this layer of energy defense," Hawkeye wrote. The fighter hovered over the roof. The belly position of the aircraft opened, except Natasha. The rest of the people jumped down. Hawkeye slowly approached the machine, found that the layer of defensive energy did not work on him, and then he took out his bow and shot an arrow towards the instrument. Buzz. The arrow just left the string, and that layer of defensive energy immediately collapsed Hawkeye, and if it weren't for Leon reaching out and pulling him, it is estimated that he would have fallen directly from the roof. This layer of energy can actually recognize the intention of being attacked. This defense mechanism is so strange. Bruce Banner clenched his fists, then glanced at Leon, and then transformed in front of him. Seeing that his body swelled rapidly, his skin quickly turned green, and in less than 3 seconds, he transformed into a Hulk. Roar! The Hulk roared, his voice like thunder, and then raised his fist and smashed it towards the instrument. Buzz! The light blue light curtain trembled twice, and then a ripple shook violently, and the huge body of the Hulk was directly shaken away, but he did not fly, but his feet stepped on the ground tightly, and after being shaken out, his feet plowed out 2 ravines on the ground on the roof. Roar! The Hulk slammed down on the ground angrily, and everyone's feet shook, and then a piece of rooftop ground shattered. Roar! The Hulk rushed out again and punched the instrument again, and this time, the huge countershock force directly shocked the Hulk out. Leon beckoned, and the metal below flew up, lifting Hulk's huge body back. This thing can't be broken at all. Hawkeye frowned. Seeing that the Hulk wanted to rush up again, Leon frowned and said, "Okay, stop, I'll try." Quote. The Hulk roared at him, but Leon only glanced at him coldly, and Hulk's body trembled, and then gradually shrunk, and finally turned back into Bruce Banner. "I can't help it, you try." Bruce Banner rode. Leon nodded, stared at the instrument, and stretched out his hand to it. He wanted to use magnetic control to disable or damage the instrument, but the next moment it was a difference to raise his eyebrows, and he found that he could not sense the magnetic force of the metal instrument. This is very strange, as if the light blue shield separates the inside from the outside. Leon's mind moved again, and there was a red light gathering in his eyes, and then 2 red laser beams burst out from his eyes and hit directly on the shield. Buzz! Where the 2 touched, the light blue shield rippled in bursts, like water waves, making the entire energy shield tremble. The energy shield seemed to be about to break, but Leon knew that its shaking was not due to damage at all, but the reason why the 2 energies collided and rubbed against each other. That shield wasn't broken at all. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.